Margaret Williams,
Margaret
whatever
Williams.
you're comfortable calling me. Throw that on the floor, do anything you want with them.
Pay no attention to this thing.
Okay.
When were you born and where?
I was born in Brooklyn, in God's country, in 1924.
Where was that?
I was born on 18th Street, about number 380.
In a house?
In a house.
Really? Are you the oldest?
No, I'm the youngest. I had two brothers, older, a brother Charles and a brother William. And then they were very lucky they had a girl. Charles and a brother William. And then they were very lucky they had a girl.
Tell me a little bit about your parents.
My parents, my mother went with her friend Mamie Dugan to a display or a parade or a march, I don't know what the word was, at the Armory on 8th Avenue and 15th Street. Recognize the spot?
Absolutely.
And after the display, my mother and Mamie Dugan were outside, and someone they knew by the name of Harry came along talking to them. And then my father came along, and he introduced, the introductions went around. During the week, my mother got a postcard. Please meet me at the Armory next Sunday, the date. I'd like to see you again. Signed, Charlie Williams. My father got a postcard. Please meet me at the Armory next Sunday. I'll be happy to see you again, Jesse Robertson. Harry, the friend, sent a card to each of them.
Oh, boy.
Without their knowing it, because in those days we didn't have phones.
Oh my goodness.
So they each got a postcard. Well,
Oh
anyway,
my goodness.
so my mother said to Mamie Dugan, should I go? Mamie said, sure, let's go. So she went and met my father,
Yeah.
and that was the beginning of it.
Wow.
But you know, they went together and then were engaged and married. So Harry, who sent the postcards, and Mamie Dugan stood up for them at their wedding.
That's great. That's
So that was the beginning.
We've been towed in front of that very armory.
That very
Had our car towed. We have. That's what we have, haven't we?
Yeah.
that
That's what we
very
have.
a very armory.
Because they're
yeah.
doing construction on it right now. Or
Uh.
they've been trying to refurbish it and you know, do some nice work to it. So we parked illegally, not realizing we were in a construction zone. So
Well-
we had to go get our car out of the clink.
Oh, that was probably about 1912.
Really?
Wow.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
because they were married in 1914. After a lot of discussion in the family, because my mother wasn't Catholic, and the Catholic family was saying she's nothing but a black Protestant, and the Protestant family was saying, I don't know if they'll even be married. Maybe they'll just be living together. So there was a lot of that back and
Really?
forth.
Really?
And then the big statement was Nana Ryan, who, Grandma's cousin, I think.
Grandpa's cousin, wasn't it?
Grandpa's cousin?
I think so.
All right. Said they won't be together long enough to use a 2-cent bag of salt.
Really?
And 56 years later.
Wow.
So
Where were they from? Where was your parents' childhood spent?
my mother was born on Cherry Street in Manhattan, but I think shortly after that the family moved to Brooklyn.
Okay.
My father's family from the area, 6th Avenue, 12th Street, 13th Street, so he grew up in that section. But both their parents, my father's mother died not in childbirth, but shortly after a childbirth. And then my mother's mother died. I'm sure you've heard this. They were trying to move away from the Catholics, and she fell down the stairs and fractured her skull.
You
So
touched upon that briefly when we were going
Yeah.
over that. Do
They-
you want to get into that? at
that,
all?
well, that's all I know about it. And then her husband went out to California to see if he could get, he could set up something where it had to get the children together
Yeah.
and they'd live out there. But he was killed in the earthquake in 1906
Wow.
in California. So actually they had no parents, and then this Nana Ryan came onto the scene who took care of them.
Okay.
And then my father's side, his father remarried, and that Nana Williams raised 5 kids.
Wow. So they met at the Armory.
They met at the Armory, yeah.
Were married 2 years later.
2 years later.
Where were they married?
Holy Name on Prospect Park West and Prospect Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Oh, wow.
That,
You're really all
No,
things Brooklyn.
actually, no.
Do you?
and the flight of stairs
Yeah.
going up.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all baptized there, and Lila was married there too.
Oh, really?
And Lil went to school there.
First one.
The first one, yes. And the second too.
And the second
And
two.
the second two.
Uncle Bart, she married Uncle Bart there.
Uncle Bart there. That's another funny story with, they were talking to the priest, Lila and Bart,
Yeah.
and he said to them, go over to church together and go to confession. And Lila was going to confession. He said to her, is there someone in the confessional with you? And she said, yes, Bart. She said, you told us to go to confession together.
Oh, no.
So the two of them were huddled in the little box going to confession.
Making sure that you're centered. We're getting you in all your beauty here.
Oh yeah, yeah, all my beauty. I should have the spikes.
Yeah, really. We're disappointed. So, how long you come?
Okay.
Well, your brothers
my,
were ahead of you.
My brothers,
Charles and
Charles was born in 1916, and Bill was born in 1919. I was born in 24, and they were, we were all born on 18th Street.
on 18th.
That's 380 18th Street.
So what? Give me a couple good memories of
And
your
then,
childhood.
and then they moved. We called it down the hill. Everything in that area was called up the hill and down the hill, and Prospect Park West was the hill.
Yeah.
So we moved up and down by Greenwood Cemetery.
Mhm.
We were on, it used to be called Gravesend Avenue.
Mhm.
And after I learned where I lived and my telephone number and everything, they changed it to McDonald Avenue.
Really?
Yeah. After I learned the whole thing. The childhood. Many, many good memories, but I think the ones that I regret the most was living through the Depression.
Yeah.
We had a terrible time, and if I may just backtrack to this
Sure,
Uncle
please.
this Uncle George.
Yeah.
At one point, he cursed. This is my mother's version. He cursed us, and she always felt, besides living through the Depression, all the things that we were deprived of, she felt came as a result of his having cursed
Yeah.
her. So another thing about George, I think he established polygamy, but I'm not sure of that. He
So he was a Mormon.
one of their best.
Really? Oh, George
Because
had
he was with someone from that you knew.
And Sadie.
And Sadie.
is this Jess's brother George?
Yes, he was the oldest.
Okay.
And the word was that he was born on their way from Scotland. He was born aboard ship.
Oh,
I
really?
thought he was born in Scotland.
Well,
No, that's
maybe
it.
it was Scottish territory. I don't know where they were, but he was.
Oh, interesting. See, I learned something.
So
different.
that was George.
But George now had a couple wives. Is that the deal? Or not necessarily wives?
Not necessarily wives.
Okay.
He,
That's a nice way of putting it.
Edith being one of them. Edith and Tommy.
Yeah. He was. I thought he was married to both of them.
Well,
Because I could never figure that one out.
no, I don't think anyone did. But when they, he and Edith lived in a place in Greenpoint where the house came to a point like this. I think it was on Manhattan Avenue or Meeker Street, but anyway, the house came to a point. And I remember her many nights looking out the window to see if he were coming home, because only God knows where he was or had been. And just the anxiety of waiting for him to appear. And she had the boy Tommy, and we always thought of him as our cousin, but actually there was no relationship
Really?
there.
Okay.
We even called him Tommy Robertson.
Yeah.
That wasn't his name at all.
Okay.
I don't remember what his name was.
But didn't he use that name, Robinson?
Yes.
As an adult?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
But there was nothing legal about it.
Okay.
Okay, or from George, back to my house.
See, that's
Yes.
the kind of thing I have no clue, because I never knew George.
What
I
was
met
it?
Edith.
Just going down my family tree for 1 sec. What was Uncle Bill like?
Your grandfather, Uncle Bill.
William Robertson.
Yeah, Uncle Bill.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
That would be her Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
There would be
Uncle
my
Will.
Uncle Will. They
Uncle Will, they called
okay.
him
they
Will.
called him Uncle Will,
Okay.
and very concerned guy, you know, for my mother and Lila and Helen, always keeping tabs on them, and they always referred to him as our Bill. It was never our Will. It was never just we saw Will or we heard from Will, but our Will called.
Really?
So I think there was a good relationship among them. And I'm surprised that the relationship was as strong as it was, since they had been separated as children. But they did very well.
Where did he live? Did you know Anna, his wife?
Yes, yes, very well.
What was she like?
I didn't know them living in Brooklyn. They were out here on the island before.
We were born, 1922.
Oh, 22 they came in. Okay. No wonder I didn't remember them.
They were out in the country.
They were out in the country. So the trip from Brooklyn out here was a day's venture.
Yeah.
And we used to say, we're going out on the island. You would think we were going to Costa Rica or someplace, the way we talked. But they were very warm and caring people whenever we came. And Lila had a car or a truck, and we always came with her. I know I'm overlapping here, but
That's okay.
when she had the Times Square hand laundry, she cut off the legs of a couple of chairs, so the legs were about this big, and they were in the back of the truck, and we sat on the chair
Really?
in the back of the truck
nice.
to come to see Aunt Anna and Uncle Will.
That's wild. That's nice. The traveling and stop. Is Lila Aunt Lila? Is that what
Lila.
we're talking about?
Yes,
here?
Aunt Lila.
So I actually did meet her and know her. I mean, we talked
When you were a child, yes.
when I was a child. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was always hazy with the connections, but I remember Aunt Lila.
So Uncle Will, Aunt Lila, my mother, and Aunt Helen were that family.
Now you were born at the house. You moved a couple times as a child.
Yeah, we moved to this place on McDonald Avenue,
Okay.
and then I guess 4 times. Then we lived on Fort Hamilton Parkway, and the last thing was Reeve Place.
Reeve.
Reeve, R-E-E-V-E.
Do you know
place.
specific addresses of those
Yes.
places?
2721 Fort Hamilton Parkway, 159 McDonald Avenue, and 32 Reeve Place.
Wow. What do you consider your home
Excuse me, between Fort Hamilton Parkway and Reeve Place, we lived on 9th Street, 409 9th Street,
Really?
between 6th and 7th Avenue.
Oh, okay.
It was the Republican Club, and they needed a caretaker for the club. Now, remember, we were just coming out of the Depression at the time, and my father went to apply for the job. And after the interview and so forth and so on, the man said to him, by the way, what party do you belong to? And my father said, Republican, of course, as of that moment, because prior to that,
Right.
they had been Democrats.
Sure. Hey.
And it was a brownstone,
Mm-hmm.
but it had an extra floor on it. You'll see it on 9th Street.
Yeah, we'll take a walk down.
There was a little synagogue, and then a house, and then the Republican Club. And we had the first floor. We had an apartment down there.
Wow.
And while we were, the men would come for the club, and they'd be upstairs playing cards or shooting pool or whatever they were doing upstairs. And they would call down to my mother, could they have a sandwich? And my mother would make sandwiches for them and send them up, make a few extra pennies, or a pot of coffee, or whatever was going.
Right, right.
And the guys used to say they wanted corned beef, but it had to be lean. And they'd say to my mother, "Is it lean?" "Yes, whatever you wanted." That was it. If you wanted it fatty, yes, it was fatty. And she did that all the time. Whatever you wanted,
Whatever
that's
you
what
wanted.
you got. But what you actually got was whatever she had.
Right, exactly.
So,
Oh, that's nice. That's good.
but I consider my childhood Windsor Terrace, Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish, Fort Hamilton Parkway.
Mhm.
That's where I went to school.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So give me some good memories.
And we lived 2 blocks from Prospect Park in this direction, and a couple of blocks from Greenwood Cemetery in that direction.
Mhm.
And on the corner of the house was a farm. We used to be sent down in the afternoon to get string beans or tomatoes or whatever my mother was going to have. But, I mean, it's so hard to imagine a farm being in that area. And because of our proximity to the cemetery, we had many, what do you call it? Monument places, but florists of different styles. People going to the graves would stop to get flowers and stuff, so there were a lot of greenhouses in the area too. So, great spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great spot.
It's hard to imagine that today.
Yeah, it's
It's actually not even that bad today, because when I lived in Bay Ridge, I used to drive up Fort Hamilton
Oh.
Parkway to Downstate, and I know all the florists that you're talking about.
Oh, right along there,
right
yeah.
alongside.
You know, one of the florists was up around 19th Street was McGovern. You
Mhm.
might recognize that name. There for years in the family, and a lot of back and forth with him. How many years later? About 1972, my father was admitted to Queen of Peace Nursing Home. The first night, he's there in the dining room at the table. Who's at the table with him but a McGovern? He had gone to Sunday school with him in Holy Name Parish
Wow.
about 100 years before.
Holy cow. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It's, you never know who you're
Another
running into.
florist.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So does Windsor Terrace officially begin on 9th Street? We want to know that because we
It began, no, Windsor Terrace began
going.
on this side of Prospect Park West.
Really? Okay.
Um,
Okay. By the circle there?
It,
Yeah.
No, well, yeah, down from there,
Mhm.
but
Like 14th Street in that general area.
no, over further,
Okay.
Prospect Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess 14th Street might be considered it, but we went down Windsor Place,
Mhm.
Sealy Street, Vanderbilt Street, Greenwood Avenue.
Mhm.
That was, and then it went from there to Beverly Road, and then over as far as the cemetery.
Okay. Okay. You probably are more familiar with these roads than I
Yeah,
am.
if she were on Fort Hamilton Parkway, yeah, she would have it.
So what did you used to do with your brothers as a kid? What was fun to do? Fun
Um,
memories, or not even with your brothers, just in general.
I got out of school first because I was the youngest. We had a pair of skates, and I would run home, get the skates, and go up to Vanderbilt Street and McDonald Avenue. The DeSantis had a cemented spot, and I'd be skating out there. And by the time they came home, they'd be up after me,
Oh, really?
ready to kill me for taking the skates. Because we only had one pair.
You took the pair. Oh, that's nice.
I thought of several things about the Depression.
Yeah. Because you were a young girl.
I was a kid when the...
Do you actually remember? Do you have a conscious awareness of
Of it,
Depression?
yes.
Yeah? How so?
That and when Prohibition was repealed.
Really?
I have to tell you that one. Well, we just didn't have food and clothes. I mean, you just didn't have it, you know.
Yeah.
But when we knew things were getting better, two things. We would have Jell-O for dessert. And then later on, we had Jell-O with fruit in it. So things were getting better.
Yeah.
And then we had Jell-O with fruit in it with whipped cream. That was a bye-bye Depression.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
then coffee, we had every morning. And we would have it Sunday evening, because you had the big meal on Sunday in the middle of the day. And then you'd have it Sunday evening. When things got better, we would have it one night during the week, too. So things were really looking up.
Mm-hmm.
But we went from the Depression into rationing from World War II. So what you couldn't get in the Depression, some of it you couldn't get in World War II.
Right. Right. You have a conscious awareness of FDR coming in? And all that?
I do.
Yeah?
Yeah. And the WPA and the CCC and all his alphabet.
Right.
Those.
Now, your family were Democrats, but although you had maybe switched to Republicanism at this point?
No, much later.
Oh, later.
Much later,
okay.
yeah.
So you would have been all for FDR at the time?
At the
Yeah.
time, I remember my father being very much in favor of it.
Really?
When Prohibition was repealed, Aunt Lila and Uncle Bart, George Duffy, I don't know if George and May Duffy were friends of Lila and Bart. And they wanted a keg of beer that night and other things. And my mother couldn't take anything. She would get deathly sick from wine or anything. And they kept saying to her, take it, Jess. Prohibition was repealed today. For God's sake, take some. So my mother, being a good sport, took some. And the next morning, she was as sick as a dog, but she was outside and throwing up in front of the house. And the sanitation man passed, and he stopped, and he said to her, what a load you must have had on last night. And she stopped vomiting long enough, and she said, go to hell, and continued vomiting. Later, he met my father, and he said to him, be careful when you go home. The old lady has a crank on.
Oh, my God.
Because everybody knew everybody,
yeah.
You know. Well, that starts me. Listen, this could go on all week.
Go ahead.
We had people coming to the house all week. You had the ice man, the vegetable man, the fish man, the clothing man, the insurance man. So we had Nick the ice man, and he came every day or every other day with a piece of ice. For the ice box.
Right.
And the last prayer at night was, did you empty the ice pan? It was
Really?
the last thing, because if you didn't, you'd be mopping up
Right,
the flood.
exactly.
Forster was the vegetable man, and he came up McDonald Avenue with his truck and all the fresh vegetables, and the women would go out wearing their house dresses and an apron and buy from Forster.
Put them in pockets in the apron and whatnot.
And on Friday, they had a fish man used to come with the ice packed on the side of the truck and fish. You didn't pay for anything as we do now with insurance or credit cards and stuff. So Mr. Schwartz was the insurance man, and he came every week to collect the insurance. And my mother had a little envelope that the insurance book came in. Now this is, again, during the Depression. And if my mother had a couple of pennies, 5 cents, 7 cents or anything, she would put it in the envelope. So when Schwartz came, she'd empty the envelope to see how much she needed to pay for the insurance.
Right, right.
And then we had a couple by the name of Mr. and Mrs. McCullough. And they used to go over to New York about once a week or once every 2 weeks. And with the ice packed on the side and fish. you didn't pay for anything as we do now with insurance or credit cards and stuff. So Mr. Schwartz was the insurance man, and he came every week to collect the insurance. And my mother had a little envelope that the insurance book came in. Now this is, again, during the Depression. And if my mother had a couple of pennies, 5 cents, 7 cents, or anything, she would put it in the envelope. So when Schwartz came, she'd empty the envelope to see how much she needed to pay for the insurance.
Right, right.
And then we had a couple by the name of Mr. and Mrs. McCullough. And they used to go over to New York about once a week or once every 2 weeks. And you would tell them what you wanted. Sheets for the bed or night clothes or anything. And they would do the shopping and come and see if this is what you liked. And you paid them, quote, on time. So you paid them as much as you could.
Right. Oh, and they
as often as you could.
That was the service they did.
That was the service they did, yeah.
It's funny, you said New York. You were in New York, but we're talking about
We're talking the city, yes. They would go over to Delancey Street or someplace like that.
Right. The ins and
And
outs.
the ins and outs of it.
Did you go into Manhattan very often?
No.
No?
We didn't have the money. Truly, we didn't have the car fare.
The subway would have been in existence, though, right?
The subway, the independent subway came into existence when I was in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been about 1937, 1938.
Really? Okay.
And, but even at that, we didn't have
The fare.
we didn't have the fare, and you just did without it.
You must have ridden on it a couple times as a kid, no?
And not
really?
too often.
I was going to ask you what it was like on the
well,
inside. I've heard.
I got in when I got into high school. We did more of that, but you know, in a way, well, the money situation was so tight that we played on the streets. You know, we played ball and softball and stickball and potsy and whatever else was going around. Tag.
Bronx.
The Bronx. Oh, then.
Bronx girl, right?
Yeah, you'd have that version of it. Yeah.
What was
And-
potsy? Did you know what potsy is? Did you have that? Did you play?
No,
What's
Hopscotch.
hopscotch.
Like
Oh,
hopscotch. Yeah, they
okay.
called it. It was potsy in our day.
Slightly different. The grid is different, but it's the same.
You jumped from one
Right.
box to the other.
Okay.
How, if I could just ask a question, how did your family and neighbors' families afford the lodging situation in the Depression?
Any money that we had went primarily for the
That was your
lodging,
almost.
and many times you owed 2 months' rent or something like that. So that was very hard. The food situation, and this I always resented. We went wherever they were giving food out. Different groups would have. I guess it would be comparable to a soup kitchen. The Elks, the Knights of Columbus, St. Vincent de Paul Society, and stuff like that. And you had to have your coupon.
Yeah.
And I hated those lines.
Yeah.
And then if you went, you got a lot of cereal wherever you lived. And you went and got a lot of bread where you lived. And you got something else. We would share.
Yes.
Really? Oh, that's
You
nice.
know, everybody.
How about the ethnicities in the neighborhood? You know, a lot of mixed religion, mixed ethnicities, or
Not much.
no?
No, not much. Certain sections, particularly in Brooklyn, very German, Scandinavian, Italian, definitely pockets of it. Where we were, we had some group of Italians on some blocks, and I'd say Irish predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
And the religion, most of us went to Catholic school. I
Right.
don't remember.
You said you went where on Fort Hamilton Parkway, was it?
To school,
Yeah,
Immaculate Heart of Mary,
Immaculate Heart of Mary.
between East 2nd and East 3rd Street.
Okay.
And next month, I'm going to a birthday party. My friend from grammar school, the old bag, she'll be 80.
Where's
But
that?
from grammar school.
Where's
That's
that?
going to be in Connecticut. She lives way up, and
Really?
I'll probably go over on the ferry.
Oh, okay. Oh, that'll be
Too.
nice. Right? That'll be lovely, actually. Out in that Orient Point there. Go out to Orient, Long Island. Or
Yeah,
Port
Port
Jefferson.
Jeff, yeah.
Port Jefferson. Right. Always forget about poor Jeff. So,
Can I ask where she went to high school?
of course.
Graduated from Bishop McDonald Memorial High School on Eastern Parkway. That was the Catholic high school. It was a scholarship school. And you meet people from bishops all over the world.
Really?
It's a school for the deaf now on Eastern Parkway. It's just down from, oh, you know that big library at Bartel Pritchard Square there? Union Street.
Brooklyn Library?
Oh,
Yeah, the
Brooklyn
big library.
Right at the
That
Grand
was
Army Plaza.
Grand Army Plaza. That
Yeah.
was being built when I went to high school. And then we would pass the botanical gardens and the museum and all that stuff. And on the next block was Bishop's. And going the other way, Bishop's High School, Girls Commercial High School, and Clara Barton Vocational School. Now, each of those schools were girls only. So you can imagine when we were let out, there must have been 3,000 girls on Eastern Parkway
Wow.
going in every direction.
Wow. We were just coming up Eastern Parkway this morning. That's how we get to the Jackie Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Formerly the Interborough Park.
Interborough, yeah.
Exactly.
I was accepted at Bishop McDonald.
You were accepted at
Yeah.
Bishop, but the travel,
My
right?
mother just decided I could not do that every day.
That would
No,
be a little
it's,
far. That would be very far for you to get to.
yeah, and also costly.
So I got to Sacred Heart. Good, bad, or different, that's right.
So did you go to Prospect Park as a child?
Yes, we spent a lot of time in Prospect
Yeah.
Park. And then as we got a little older too, at 15th Street, the entrance to the park there goes in at an angle, and they used to have skating. So we would go up there in the evenings for skating.
Right.
That was the-
Skates.
No, by that time we had another one.
What's the famous bar right there?
Oh, Farrell's.
Was Farrell's?
Oh,
bar?
Farrell's, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that bar? Or are you
Yes,
familiar?
I
Okay.
remember it. And for years and years and years, they had a ladies' entrance. And ladies were not allowed into the bar for many years, and then eventually they were allowed in, but they couldn't go in the main entrance.
Really?
So they had a ladies' entrance.
Isn't that funny? Because we went there. Sharon's father runs a bar in the Bronx, and that's a famous Irish bar. And so we had to go in and check it out. You know, her brothers wanted to see it, and there was some sort of a weird booth in the beginning. I wonder if
Yeah.
that might have been part of the ladies' entrance or something.
The ladies' entrance was not on Prospect Park West itself. It was as it curves around
Okay.
to Coney Island Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
It was there.
Okay.
And we never called it, by the way, Prospect Park West. We always called it 9th Avenue.
Really?
Yeah. We were always going to or from 9th Avenue because we went there for Trun's Butcher, and there was a dry goods store across the street from Holy Name. And I thought when I was a kid, I thought the man's name was Burke. And we always called him Mr. Burke. It wasn't Burke at all. His name was Bert. He was
Oh.
Jewish. But all the kids called him Mr. Burke, and
Mr. Burke.
he answered to it all the
Oh,
time.
okay.
What did you guys know from Jewish?
What do we know? Yeah, Burke and Burke.
You didn't know the Hamels from Windsor Terrace, did you? Because that's where Pete Hamill.
Pete Hamill,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
I didn't know them, but
His father came over with my mother's father during the Depression from Ireland, and they were travel buddies together. And then the Hamill, his father stayed, and my mom's father went back to Ireland again.
oh yeah, and I read Pete Hamill.
Yeah.
Windsor Terrace fellow, just like you.
Windsor Terrace, yeah.
What did you and your brothers do for fun? What you guys? I mean, did you hang out with your brothers? How much older were they than you?
And not too much, because one brother was 8 years older than
Okay.
me, and the other one was 5.
Right.
So you know, at that point in your life, this
Those are pretty big gaps.
there's a big gap.
Yeah.
But I do remember having a radio with a speaker. You know, And we were always, you know, like the TV when it first came out, it's my turn, it's your turn, whose
Right.
turn is it? But I remember fighting over that, and whose turn it was to.
For the radio or
For the radio.
For the radio? Okay.
It had a big speaker.
Yes.
So you would have been, World War II comes around, Pearl Harbor, you would have been 16 or so? Or
Yeah,
15, 16?
you're right.
17?
1941 was a Pearl Harbor.
Do you remember that day?
I do very well, yeah. I was in Manhattan that day with some of my friends, and as we were going to go down the subway, you know how the magazine and paper stands are at the corner? The man in the paper stand was calling to us, you know, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and that was it. But my older brother died in 1940, and in Pearl Harbor in 41, and my brother Bill wanted to enlist the day after Pearl Harbor, and my mother said, please, at least wait for the holidays. So he waited, I think it was January 2nd he went and enlisted. And then I entered the convent in 43. And it was about 50 years later when I realized what that must have been like for my parents. And as my father would say, one more empty place at the table, because the three of us were gone in 26 months
Wow.
or so.
Yeah.
But I never realized it until I was much older and got some sense.
Now, the brother who passed away was Charles?
Charles, yeah.
What were the circumstances surrounding?
He had nephritis, and they felt that it was a follow-up to his having had diphtheria as a child. I don't know whether there's any connection with him, but he was very sick for a long period of time, and we didn't have any of the medications that they have now, or any of the dialysis, or there was no treatment for it. Sulfur was just coming into its own, and while he was so sick, he lost his eyesight, and he had a real rough time.
Oh, that's
And so did my parents, you know, through that whole thing.
He would have been in his 20s?
He was 23.
23. When he died?
When he died.
Oh, that's
How
terrible.
old was he when he got sick?
Probably about 19 or 20.
I always thought he was a diabetic. I guess it was why, because you told me he lost his eyesight.
No, it was
diabetes
from
is certainly in the family.
the whole thing from the renal situation. But you know, my parents used to be concerned about his crossing the streets and stuff. He'd say, don't worry about it. You know, God takes one sense, he gives you another, you know, blah, blah, blah. But he had very good friends. He would say to my mother, don't worry about it. And they would walk behind him to see that he got across the main streets to
Right.
home.
Right.
And then the same thing happened to me later on. I have the blessed seizure disorder, also known as epilepsy.
Do you really?
Yeah,
I did not know that. Wow.
yes. But, pardon me?
That one I had right.
That one, yeah. For a while, when I was having the seizures, before I was controlled, before they had the medication for that, my mother would follow me to school, but I didn't know it. She would come out because we had to cross Ocean Parkway. Now, you know, about 6 or 8 lanes going across. Anyway, the policeman's name was Mr. Callahan. And he said to my mother one day, what are you doing over here every morning? She said, well, I just want to keep an eye on Margaret to be sure she gets across the parkway. He said, oh. He said, I don't want to see you again. I'll say that she gets across. So subsequent days, this Mr. Callahan would come from the middle of Ocean Parkway over to where we were at the curb, and he'd say, good morning, ladies, you know, blah, 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 to all of us walking in that direction. And I'd go across the street, never knew that my mother and he had this set up between them.
Little guardian angels.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
So that went well. And then the other brother, Bill, he died when he was 53, but he had acute pancreatitis, so he had a very rough but short time.
Now, Bill went into the service.
He was a regular Army man from 41 till till he retired from there.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Oh, so he didn't just go into the, I mean, he literally went into the military.
He was into the military, yeah.
Yeah.
And neither of them was married.
Okay.
Charles was going with someone who lived on East 17th Street. And again, in those days, we didn't have phones. And I was sent from our house
You were the postcard, huh?
to East 17th Street to tell this girl that he was sick and he couldn't keep the date.
Oh.
But I mean,
Oh, that's sad. And that had to do with what we were describing his illness?
his illness, yeah.
Oh,
he was
that's-
very sick at that time.
Oh. I hope the girl was understanding.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you telling me, and
Oh.
that's it. But here I was, trotting along Church Avenue.
Now, we're gonna get into the convent, but I have to ask if there were any beaux during the high school years.
Oh yes,
Yes.
he appeared at my jubilee.
Oh, really?
And your birthday party.
And my birthday.
Oh, a beau who's still on the scene?
He's still on the
All right.
scene.
We have to get into this now, then.
Last year I was in the convent 60 years, and
I remember.
we had the party,
Yeah.
and he came with an envelope of pictures. I could imagine a girl doing that, but I could not believe that he had saved the stuff from the prom and from this and
Oh,
that.
my goodness. Wow. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Did he ever marry?
Yes, he did. He and his wife had, I think they had 4 or 5 children. And yeah, there's another one on religion. I told him I was going into the convent. And then after that, he went with another girl, and she entered the convent. He said he would never go with a Catholic again. So he went with Alice, who wasn't Catholic, and they got married. And they had a child who had Down syndrome. So she would be walking the children on the street, and they lived adjacent to a rectory. This was in the Bronx, too. And a priest there used to see them walking and stuff, and he started talking to Alice about the child. They find out this priest was a social worker, too, did a lot to help them in getting the child placed, etc., etc., etc. Alice became a convert, and all the children were baptized.
Oh, my goodness.
After his screaming, I'll never go with another Catholic.
Oh, my goodness. He was destined. God had a plan for him.
And that's,
You know?
yeah.
What's his last name?
Slattery.
Flatter.
What's his first name?
Bill.
Bill Slattery. And Bill lives where now?
In Jersey. Let me think of the...
Do you correspond or chat on the telephone at all? Or?
not too often now. He's an old guy. But
Yeah.
Is the cruise
Too old for
offer
her.
still up? I think you should go on this cruise.
Oh, the cruise offer.
I think you deserve a cruise.
this sounds so crazy, Sharon, but after his
Yeah.
wife died, he said, Margaret, why don't you come down to the house?
Yeah.
Spend a couple of days. He said, you can sleep in Alice's bed.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
And you said, no, I don't think I want to
I
go.
said, well, I'll get down there sooner or later.
Oh, I think the cruise thing is
The cruise is still in.
I think that you deserve a cruise now.
Did he offer a cruise? Did he offer a cruise? Are you allowed to say this on camera? We don't.
Oh, sure.
He wanted to go on a cruise. He was still hung up on you all this
Yeah, I
years
think he
later.
is, yeah.
Yeah? All right.
And of course, I realized much later that
Yeah.
what I had done to him, I didn't think of it
Yeah.
at the time, but we were among the first Catholics who were hired by Methodist Hospital. They were very anti-Catholic for a number of years. And it was so bad that a priest had difficulty going in to visit any of his parishioners from St. Saviour's, right across the street
Yeah.
there. Well, anyway, time went by, and I guess they were hard up. So I was hired, and at that time they had the nurses' dining room it was a big place, and the nurses were served. And we were the waitresses and so forth. And Bill also got a job there. And I think he was the dishwasher or something. Well, anyway, the dining room was set up that at the 2 rows of tables next to the windows were the interns and the residents. And in the center of the dining room were the student nurses. And the year that I was there, I was there 1 year or 2 years, they were changing it to a cafeteria style. Then I was washing dishes. We were pushing the dishes in and out of the dishwasher and stuff. But we were among the first
Wow.
Catholics to be hired at Methodist.
Isn't that interesting?
That was in the 40s.
So that's how you know it, from the hospital?
That's how I met him, yeah.
Ah,
So we worked together, and
very good.
Now, I want to get to the...
I went to his prom, he went to my prom. I mean, it was a big thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he was a legitimate boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Two words before we get to the convent. Coney Island.
Oh, Coney Island.
Did you go?
Very often.
Really? What are your memories? Throw some memories at me.
Aunt Lila and my mother used to call it Cone's Island because it was a very Jewish place.
That's very funny.
And when the hair, can't you hear them?
That's funny.
And of course, when you went there, everybody was dressed up. You know, no casual clothes. And then we went to Steeplechase every year, and Luna Park, and the Mardi Gras in September. They had a Mardi Gras for about 3 nights, and we would go down there. We had there was a place just before Seagate. It was the last place on Surf Avenue, and it was called Ocean Tide. And you had lockers, and it was supposed to be private, but you know, handball courts and tennis courts, all that kind of stuff, and a place where you could eat. And that was a great place to go. We used to go down there in the summer. We took the trolley on Surf Avenue to the last stop, and then went into Ocean Tide and spent the day there. The last thing on your way home, you're at the other end of Surf Avenue, and the carousel was there, and you would be screaming and begging for a box of Cracker Jacks, and you got the Cracker Jacks when they could afford it to eat on the way home.
Right.
If we couldn't afford Ocean Tide food or Cracker Jacks, we went to Brighton, and it was less crowded, and my mother would pack a lunch, and we'd all go down on the McDonald's Avenue trolley. And in the summer, the trolley was open, and they had running boards on the side. So you would, and the running boards were connected by a seat that went across, would seat about 5 people. It looked like a pew in church.
Right.
And that's, the conductor would be on the outside on this running board, and we'd all be lined up in the trolley going to Coney Island.
Wow.
And the fare was 5 cents.
That sounds great. So that's really how you would get around if
That's
you
a-
needed to go to a place like that.
One time my brother, my brother's, Charlie and his friends came home, and my mother said, "Where's Bill?" They didn't know where he was. I said, "What do you mean you don't know where he is?" They had pushed him into the canal down off Coney Island. They were fooling.
They just
They
dumped
left,
him in the water?
they left him there. Some, my parents had to go after him and what have you, but they got rid of him. They threw him in the canal.
This made me think, when you said trolley, of the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers, also known as the Brooklyn Dodgers.
The Brooklyn Dodgers.
You were probably doing your ministering and whatnot around that time.
And by that time, as close as I got to Ebbets Field, we were begging. As a community, we begged for our existence. And we would sit on the side at the side door or gate of Ebbets Field, because the Dominican sisters had the front gate. And you didn't dare.
They would let you know.
You wouldn't dare step over the front of it.
That's interesting.
And then we would be there as the people coming in.
Right.
And as soon as they played the Star Spangled Banner, we left.
Because everyone was in.
That was it. There was nobody else coming. So
Yeah.
we went home with our bag of loot.
Ebbets Field was not around when you were a girl. They built it.
It was around.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was a kid, they used to have a rally at Ebbets Field every year, and all the men from the Holy Name Societies of the different parishes went to the rally. So I remember my father, Uncle Frank on the other side, Uncle Bart, well, anyway, from the different parishes, they would meet, and they marched to Ebbets Field, and they would have this big rally, and then they would come back to our house for something to eat.
Mm. You didn't go and see ball games or any of that
No.
stuff? No?
No.
Not enough.
Money, yeah.
Needed a little more.
Many times the boys went because they would be looking through holes and climbing fences and stuff, but we
Right.
didn't go.
Where was it located?
Flatbush Avenue, Flatbush around Caton. I know exactly where it is, but I don't know how to tell you.
Was it by Prospect Park, or was it?
It
far
was
beyond?
beyond. It was beyond Prospect Park.
Okay. Flatbush at Caton.
I was to games then.
Really? See, there was a mural. I went on to the other side of Prospect Park.
Alma and your father should have been too, because Alma was.
Dad was there quite a bit, or not quite. He loves it to this day. He was always a Dodgers fan. That's what he would say. You know, no matter what New York team he rooted for, he was raised a Dodgers fan.
Yep.
Which is interesting. I'll come back to that, but tell me a little bit about your decision to enter into the sisterhood.
I think it was due in large measure to seeing my brother being so sick during my teens and what my parents went through. And I think I'm not sure of this, but I felt if I could help anybody else. And when I heard about this community that did community health nursing, I said, gee, I'd be right there where I could help somebody. So,
What year was that?
at 43 I entered.
43.
Yeah.
So the war was raging in Europe. Your brother William was overseas.
He went in service, yeah.
Where was William serving?
He served in Germany too, and but all over the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You know how they were moved from
Yeah.
pillar to post.
So you were probably writing letters back. and
Writing
forth to
letters,
him.
yeah.
Do you still have some of those letters?
No, I don't have a single one of those. I think it was later when I got sent to save some stuff.
And when you went home and told Mom and Dad, this is what I'd like to do, what'd they say?
I think they were, especially my mother, I think she was very disappointed from the point of view of, in the worst way, she would have wanted grandchildren and a family. And the fact didn't look as if anything were forthcoming. Later on, and through the whole thing, they're very supportive, but I think it broke her heart initially.
Really?
Yeah.
That's got to be tough because you're trying to give yourself over to God and do something.
Yeah, it's, but I think it hurt her later on, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
And through the whole thing, I was very supportive, but.
Did your mother convert to
Oh, yeah,
Catholicism?
yes, by the way, my youngest brother, Bill, was going to be confirmed, and my mother had been taking instructions, but they didn't tell the side of the family who called her the Black Protestant. They didn't say a word about her taking instructions. So the day my brother was going to be confirmed, they invited the aunts and everybody. And who's going down the aisle of Immaculate Heart Church but my mother? And somebody, one pokes the other and said, "That looks like Jess." Yes, it was. She was being confirmed.
Wow, that's great.
So because the black Protestant, like what could she do, or what good would she ever be?
But you were raised Catholic.
We were raised Catholic. There was a priest in the parish. My mother said his name was Monsignor Riley, and she had said to him that Nana Ryan said they won't be married, they'll probably just be living together. And he said, "Tell me what she looks like and what she's going to wear." And my mother described it, and he said, "I will see that she's standing up here next to me and she'll know that you're married." So that took place. In those days you were married in the rectory if it was a mixed marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day, for I guess about the next 10 years, he would send my mother a calendar every year with the holy days and the fast days and the feast days and everything on it. So she would have something to go by. And she saw that we were, we were baptized and going to Catholic school and everything.
That's great.
I have to tell you another one about, since both my parents lost their mother when they were children. When my mother was pregnant with me, she and my father decided that if I were a girl, I would be Margaret Mary after the two grandmothers. So, lo and behold, Margaret Mary arrived. And about an hour after I was born, the knocked to the door. It was a man selling subscriptions to the Sacred Heart Messenger. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
No.
It was a magazine that was fairly popular in our day, and a lot of it was dedicated to St. Margaret Mary and the promises of the Sacred Heart to St. Margaret Mary, etc., etc., etc. So the guy knocks at the door and he's selling subscriptions to the Sacred Heart Messenger, and my father said, "We just had a little girl and we're going to name her Margaret Mary." So the man gave them a book, a prayer book, what do you call it, crucifix, something else. I still have it, so I'm going to have it buried with me,
Oh, isn't
because
that
there's
nice?
nobody else. But every year on my birthday, the story would come out. An hour after she was born, the man came.
That's great.
And my father wrote in the front of the book,
Yeah.
the date of and time and all that stuff.
That's really
So
nice.
that's how
When is your birthday?
March 26th,
March. Okay.
March 26, 1920.
2014,
And you entered the convent at 19.
19, yeah.
And where was that?
Well, like in Hempstead, over here, the old Mercy Hospital, not this building.
Okay.
It was a white frame building over on Long Beach Road. The main building of this new Mercy Hospital was going up 1940, 41, around there. And the sisters who worked at Mercy in the new place had no place to live because the novitiate used to be out here on this property. So they moved the novices and postulants over to the old Mercy Hospital, and they moved the nuns who worked at Mercy into the convent where we had originally lived. And it was that way for about 4 or 5 years until the convent was built for the Sisters of Mercy Hospital. But we lived in a place that was, it was the old Mercy Hospital, and the porch where the chapel was, there was no foundation under it. And my God, you froze to death. And sometimes we couldn't celebrate Mass in the chapel. We would have Mass in one of the parlors because there was no heat in it. And what was the old operating room was from about 1916, was our dormitory with curtains between the beds.
Really?
You know, yeah, we lived a
You're
rather
actually
rugged life.
In an operating room, tiles and everything?
The old, not too many tiles. It wasn't even that updated.
Pre-tiled?
And they had a sink, they used to call it the slop sink, which was in a little closet. And in time, it was no longer the slop sink, it was the utility sink. It was the same sink in the same closet, used for the same purposes, but they updated the name from slop sink to utility sink.
Oh, wow.
And then when I was in nursing school, we had a ward, and then we couldn't have a ward anymore, we had a unit. So I mean, it was the same place.
Oh, okay.
But lots of fun. But anyway, we were over at the old Mercy Hospital, so I never lived in the convent out here.
Okay. How long are you in
the
convent
in the
school?
Convent?
Or how, like, you know, how do you...
We were out here. The first part of it was 2 years.
Okay.
And
That's during the spiritual training. So.
2 solid years. Company once a month, except during Lent and Advent. No telephone calls. No, you could get mail occasionally. No magazines, newspapers, books. It was very, very rigid time.
Do you choose your order at that? Or is
You choose your order, yeah.
Really?
Before you even do those 2 years.
Really?
Yes.
So what attracted you to this order?
Because they were in healthcare.
Okay.
Because of the connection with my brother.
Okay. Gotcha. And this was the one that if you were going to do anything, this was the one that was. Did you know that you would become a nurse or go, to nursing school or?
It was pretty sure that you'd go to nursing school, although later it became anything that was health related,
Right.
Physical therapist, pharmacy, anything like that. But after I finished nursing school, this is. While I was in nursing school, I had several seizures.
Oh.
So, God help me. I'd have my arm strapped to me, and of course I couldn't lift patients and stuff. So I would go on the other side of the bed and help somebody to move a patient up or whatever, or take the temps, or give out the meds, or whatever, that I didn't have to use my both arms. And that's really how I got through nursing school.
Wow.
But I was seeing a neurologist in New York at the time, and he said that he would like to see my superior. He'd like to have a talk with her. So one of the appointments, she came over with me, and he said, she can be very useful to the community, very helpful and able to work, but you'll have to make certain exceptions for her. She has to have rest, the essential part, and this is again before Dilantin. She has to have rest. So we got up at 5:20 every morning, and we just didn't have it.
Right.
So she said, all right, she would be cooperative. But the sisters at Mercy Hospital in those days worked 12-hour shifts, and sometimes they didn't work on Sundays, so they were on call. All the things that he said would be dangerous. So she had to think of something else for me to do. And she thought of, maybe I could be in the medical library, maybe I could be a dietitian, someplace where I wouldn't be on call. So one day, and I was down on Henry Street for so many years, the bell rang, and I was the portress. So I went out of chapel to answer the bell, and there was a priest there. He was about this high. We used to call him the Little King. There was a comic strip, the Little King, and there he was. And he said, Sister, I fell, and I think I have a broken arm. He said, can you recommend anybody to help me? I have to be in Washington tomorrow to give an address. I had been going to Dr. Fett to have my own arm put back in the socket.
Right.
So I said, I'll call Dr. Fett. So I called him, and he said, tell him to come up to Long Island College Hospital, and I'll meet him in the emergency room, and so forth. So I tell Father, he takes off. By this time, they're finished in chapel, and the superior said to me, who was at the door? And I said, the Little King. And she said, what did he want? said he was looking for an orthopedist. She said, what did you do? I said, I called Dr. Fett. She said, social work.
There you go.
And the next thing you know, I was
You
in
found your
school for
social
doing social work.
Wow.
That's good.
There you go.
Is this the PhD?
I never had-
Are you a PhD? No?
No, I messed up. I had my master's, but then
master's
I
in
stopped
social
there.
work?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
So you would
But that's how I
dislocate
can-
your arm in the
My arm?
epileptic seizures?
in one of the seizures, I dislocated my
Oh my goodness.
my shoulder, and then a couple of times later it happened again, and then again it was like a buttonhole. It was so wide open
Yeah.
that it wouldn't stay in.
Yeah.
So it used to come out when I turned over in bed. So I'd wear a pouch in bed, so
Lord.
I could get around.
Oh my goodness.
And then eventually I had a staple put in, and it's fine.
That fixed
Oh,
it all.
the year that I had the surgery, we wore a short cape with the habit. My mother and father came out to see me, and of course the cape looked flat. And he said to my mother, "I told you they amputated."
Oh no.
Are you still on medication today for that?
Yeah, still on. Yeah, all these years, and on Dilantin since about 48. But I've had no reaction to it, even with my gums or my teeth or anything. But it's kept me going. I still have a lot of petty-molar. But you know what? After this many years, I know when I can't do certain things.
Right,
I know when I can't drive. I know when I can't sew. Because if I'm on a sewing machine, I'd be sewing my hands up, and, all this stuff. But I've gotten it.
So let's go back. You went to nursing school at St. Catherine's?
St. Catherine's in Brooklyn, and then I went to St. John's for my bachelor's in nursing, St. John's University.
In nursing?
In nursing, yeah. And then I went to Fordham for a master's in social work.
Which is really what you did.
But but what was good about it was if I were treating the whole person, the whole patient, I could approach it from the health or the emotional, the physical health or the emotional
Right.
health, and maybe be able to assist them in some way. So it worked out well.
That's great. Where was the nursing school again? You repeat?
St. Catherine's Hospital in Brooklyn.
Okay.
It was on Bushwick Avenue. It's no longer there. Any school I attended is no longer there.
St. John's moved.
I did say move. They moved.
Did you have to commute then from Hempstead to St. Catherine's?
No, by that time I was stationed on Henry Street,
Oh, okay.
Henry and Kane, and I walked along Court Street
Mm-hmm.
to St. John's, which was on Skirmahorn Street.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
This is St. John's where Dad
That's
went?
where your father went to law school, Skirmwood Street.
It's
Yeah.
so weird to think of Dad in Brooklyn. Like, I didn't think he
Yeah.
had any...
Yeah.
He never even talked about it, really.
Yeah.
That's
But,
funny.
and see, I went to St. John's, they had moved to Jamaica.
To the
by time I
camp.
went to undergraduate.
Yeah.
But the law school was still down in Brooklyn.
that was the big building on the.
Tom didn't graduate from law school until 68, and I had graduated from the Jamaica campus in 60.
So where was the law school? Just so I
In
know.
Skirmahorn
On
Street.
Skirmahorn,
Great
and
big building, I probably figured it out.
Skimmerhorn Street?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Skirmahorn.
Really?
if you go down off Court Street,
Yeah.
on the right-hand side, there was a low building,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of an orange brick, that
Mm-hmm.
funny shade of brick. And that's where the nursing school was at the time. And then 2 or 3 more buildings down was the law school, which was a big building, tall.
And Vincent got his law degree from St. John's about 76, 77, someplace like that.
That would have been in Queens at that
And
time?
then he was already moved to Queens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any good convent stories? Any?
Well, you have to
did-
tell, you have
did
to
you
talk about
raise
the begging
hell?
on the streets. Was this,
When we came to this country, the bishop said we could stay in the Diocese of Brooklyn if we could support ourselves. And we had no means of support. The sisters were from France. They didn't even speak English. So we begged. And We baked. I did the waterfront. By the time I covered the waterfront on payday.
So how old or so were you? You entered at 19. How long before they send you out to go begging? Immediately?
Very shortly.
Really?
And
Wow.
we also collected in police stations, wherever there was salary, the Navy Yard, wherever people were getting paid. And we sat with our little box and down at the waterfront as the guys were coming by. They'd rub us for good luck, and then they'd be shooting crap and pushed into the paddy wagon. The FBI was down there all the time. All these gangsters
Wow.
on the waterfront.
Yeah.
But great guys.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely great guys.
They gave you some money and whatnot?
Yes, and we really lived on the nickels and dimes of the poor, and those people were terrific.
Did you actively solicit, or were you just
No,
sitting
we just sat
quietly?
there quietly. And we, as I said, we did Ebbsfield.
Mm-hmm.
We did A&S's at the side door because the Dominicans had the front door there too.
I didn't know they begged.
Yes, and I remember that nun being there when I went. There was my mother. She'd be sitting there. Good convent stories. We also collected, if the pastor would allow us, at a parish church on Sundays, and you'd stand at the door after each mass. One of the sisters, you'd have to go and ask the priest, may we come? And one of them said to Father, may we come to take up a collection? He said, isn't it strange, sister, I've never seen you in the parish taking care of any of our parishioners. She said, yes, isn't it strange, Father, I've never met you on a sick call. He said,
Yeah.
you can have the collection.
Yeah.
She was very funny, and then she went to the firehouse and asked the firemen if we could collect there. The guy said he didn't think it would, no, he didn't think it was a good idea. She said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. She said, the policemen are so good to us. And then she set up a competition between the firemen.
That's smart.
That's good thinking. It still works to this day, I think.
She was so funny. During World War II, she was taking sugar from the table. And the boss said to her, sister, stop taking that. What are you doing with that sugar? She said, I'm taking it to the patient. She said, do you know it's rationed and somebody has to stand online to get the sugar and everything? She said, well, if I had 3 cups of tea a day and took 2 teaspoons of sugar in each cup, so she's measuring out the teaspoons of sugar times 7.
Right.
I went off to the patient with the bag of sugar. I'll give up the sugar, I'll give it to the patient.
Oh, that's nice.
You couldn't believe some of the stuff. Yeah.
Was it
funny.
difficult suddenly finding yourself thrust into dormitory life? With
Very.
all
I
these
found it
women?
very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I found most difficult though was you're living with a group of women who came from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Some of them were an only child. Some of them were one of 10. Some were poor. Some were comfortable. All these different kinds of people. And some of them had no sense of humor.
Which you obviously do.
But you know, coming from my mother and Lila, I mean, if you didn't think something was funny, God help you, you know. But they had no sense of humor.
Did you think some of them might have been put there as opposed to their own free will? Not put there, but you know what I mean? Was it?
Yeah, I think so. If yes, I think that happens sometimes.
Yeah. It's difficult.
And that was priests too. That was
Priests as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my mother wants me to do this, that kind of thing.
Right. You didn't see the movie The Magdalene Sisters, did you?
No,
Did you hear about it?
I heard about it. Yeah,
It's rough to watch, and you know who knows the accuracy of it.
yeah, that's
Rough to watch. That's the reason I asked the question, because some of the ladies in that were more, but that was a different situation in Ireland. That's what they would dispose of some of these ladies that had committed sin. You know, they would put them in there, and it was a different kind of thing, the reform system.
You know, down on Hopkinson Avenue, for years and years and years, the Good Shepherd Sisters had a place, and girls, the bad girls, were sentenced there. And after a while, some of those girls became sisters, and they were the third order of these sisters. Well, anyway, when we were kids and you misbehaved, your mother would threaten you. Once more, and you'll be down to the house of Good Shepherd. It was on Hopkinson Avenue.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you went to very, I would think, dangerous parts of Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, yeah. We were in some of the poorest sections. Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, but Brooklyn.
Were those sections back then still considered?
Some of them were very, yeah. And then, of course, they got worse.
Yeah.
But they were bad enough then, and we had to be very careful. But we had a patient on DeKalb and Nostrand Avenue. And at one point, that was a German area, and it was a German cafe, and almost like a little hotel. They had rooms upstairs. Well, by the time I had this patient, the neighborhood was black, except my patient. He lived in a little hall bedroom. And just an aside, I said to him one day, he had a broom handle on the trunk that was next to his bed, and I said, "May I throw this away?" He said, "Hell no, I use this to hit the mice over the head at night." So anyway, I couldn't. So we're leaving it, and teenage girls used to come out with us on cases sometimes. And this very attractive blonde was with me, and as we came out of the patient's apartment, I looked down the stairs, there was a group of men standing. So what are they doing? Are they shooting up? Are they drinking? Are they shooting crap? I mean, something obviously was going on. So I said to Marie, "Go down ahead of me." No, I was in full habit at the time. "Go down ahead of me. Don't stop. Walk right out onto Nostrand Avenue. I'm right behind you." So with that, the guy lifts the bottle in the brown paper bag, the proverbial bag, and sees me coming, and he says to the others, "Here comes the church lady." And they separated, formed a guard of honor, and the two of us trotted out onto Nostrand Avenue.
There you go.
But we were never hurt, but on Fridays, in a particular area, you would do as many cases as you could in the early part of the day. So you'd be out of Bed-Stuy by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And on Saturday, you could go in early because they were still sleeping.
People were going to drink their paycheck and get rowdy.
Yeah,
or
so
whatever.
we try to plan it like that,
And this would have been in the 50s and 60s?
In the 50s, yeah.
50s. At that time, would drugs have been prevalent?
They weren't, they were just starting,
So you would have been seeing all this as it was ushering in.
Oh yeah, we watched it all, yeah.
Wow.
And we worked Myrtle Avenue. We were really all of Brooklyn, all the sections. And Coney Island when it was Cones Island when it was at its worst.
And you were ministering to people who were sick at this time?
Yes.
So you were a full-fledged nurse?
We were the nurse, and we had to have...
So you weren't necessarily begging in these areas. You were going to help people who were sick in the area.
That's right, and we begged where the money was.
Oh, okay.
How
That's
did you
right.
have time to do the begging? When you were doing
Well,
this nursing?
You had to fit everything in. For example, on the piers, they were paid every Friday. You went down to the pier.
It didn't go.
You did a case. You saw a patient as close to the pier as you could, and then you went down and did the collecting, and then you went to another patient after that. But you had to mesh it. And the cops were paid in the afternoon, so we would get an early start.
You knew when everyone got their paycheck.
And when they got their paycheck.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Every week, every other week.
What?
How did the patients get to you? Through the churches?
Any number of ways. A doctor, the priests, neighbors. The referrals came in from many, many sources. And the interesting thing to me now is we had a pad about that size and that was the referral sheet. And you took the name and address and blah, blah, blah. You always took the parish because Vanderbilt Street and Vanderbilt Avenue, see the double names in Brooklyn?
Right.
Yes.
And if you saw Vanderbilt Avenue and it said Immaculate Heart of Mary, you know, no, there's something wrong here. So we would tie into that. But anyway, you had this little referral sheet. And on the back, when the patient was discharged, you would write a summary, that much. So many visits, so many hours. A patient admitted to Methodist Hospital on such and such a date. Case closed. Patient admitted to Little Flower Nursing Home. Case closed. Now, by the time I left, we had a Manhattan telephone directory for every patient.
Oh, wow.
The charts were about this thick when I left, and we used to go with this one sheet. Little piece of
I
paper.
think that my wife would sympathize with
I
that.
think,
you know,
those,
the amount of paperwork.
the paperwork, yeah.
Oh, it's insane.
Did the patients ever pay any?
No, we weren't, no, and we weren't allowed to take anything from the patient.
Not even a gift?
Nothing,
No.
absolutely nothing. But this is just interesting. We had to bring our own lunch, and the only thing we could take from them was the water. We'd boil the water and make a cup of tea or something. And we just couldn't take anything from them. But what we've realized later, suppose we were in that parish during the year that somebody, we took care of his mother, and somebody would throw something in the basket, you know. And then over the years, I'll tell you another good one. We had a patient who lived right off Myrtle Avenue. They had 5 or 6 children. The husband worked, but God, they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And anything that we got in the community, that I could put their way, I would do it. And later on, he told me the kids used to say to the mother, we need this and we need that, we don't have it. God is good, something will happen during the day. And when they came home from school, they'd say, God send anything? You know, that kind of thing. Well, anyway, a couple of years ago, I had a call from a priest in the diocese, and he said, Sister, do you remember a patient by the name of, I said no. He said, how about Catherine Glynn? I said, oh yes, you know, very well. He said, she's seriously ill, and if you have a chance, would you stop in and to see her? Well, she was not a patient by any means.
Thank you. You're covering mine.
Oh, okay. So I called her daughter, and you know, may I stop in to see your mother? Oh, by all means. So I went, and the woman gave me an envelope, a card, and I said, oh no, I didn't come for money. You know, I just came to see you. She said, it's not for you. It's for you to do for somebody else what you did for us so many times. So
That's nice.
I had the money, and then somebody needed it.
That's great.
You know,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
we had another one. It was around Columbus Day. You know, it was a holiday, and they did not have food in the house. This was in the 70s. He said, the husband said to me, no, we'll get paid in another day or so.
Yeah.
So I had $35 with me. So I gave it to them. And I said, whatever you can get for today and tomorrow, you know. He said, well, give it back to you. Don't worry about it. I mean, $35 is going to break the community. And, months later, got this note from them with the money back. The same day, a woman up on 3rd Avenue in Bay Ridge was having a hard time, so I gave the $35 to her. But see, that's how it went around. Now, in turn, she would do it for somebody else.
Yeah.
And recently, we got $3,000 gift here, and the Superior put a sign up, does anybody remember this patient or having taken care of this person? We got this money, you know, and I'd like to acknowledge the sister who worked with. But it was a lot of fun. Hard times, but a lot of fun. I don't know whether you're getting tired, but I have a host of other things about the
No, I
family.
want to stop the tape. I want to take a 5-minute break. I'll put another tape in, and then we'll finish up with that tape.
Okay.
Okay, so everyone good
May
for
I
5?
get soda, coffee, tea, water?
Water.
Milk?
Oh, I'm not, you're not hooked then, thank you.
In the neighbor's room. Penny for your thoughts, Bill. You said no, a dime for the movies.
And that was during the Depression.
That was during the Depression, yeah.
It's a great line.
I have another one. We used to go to the stores for the neighbors, and you'd get a penny or 2 for going to the stores. And we went around collecting soda bottles. We got 2 cents deposit on each bottle. And of course, since you didn't have a freezer or a refrigerator even, you never had stuff like that at home, in the house. So if it was an occasion, you're going to have soda, you had to go out to buy it. And then in the winter, we didn't have an ice box. We had a window box, and that was stuck outside the window, and you put all the perishables
Really?
there. So the milk and butter or whatever was there
In the window box?
in the window box. It was about the size of an air conditioner thing.
Wow. I was going to ask you about the ice. A block of ice would be delivered, put
Yeah.
into the ice bin,
Yes,
and then you would just chip at it as you needed it? Or, you know, or
you never,
what'd you do? I mean,
you just left it there to keep the food cold.
oh, it was just refrigeration.
Just
it wasn't
refrigeration.
Like for drinks or
No,
anything like that.
no, we didn't have them.
You didn't do that.
You
You
didn't-
didn't do that whole ice.
You didn't
thing.
have them.
Okay.
No, no.
Those
just
modern conveniences
see-
like ice cubes.
See that hen over there, that white hen on the thing? That was my mother's, and 1914 and 1915, the A&P, which used to be a tea and coffee company, was going general. And that was the butter dish. And when you went to the store, even when I was a child, you didn't get butter like we have it now. You took out a piece, a wedge, out of this big container. So that was the butter dish.
Oh, wow.
Well, anyway, so we had it at home. And again, if my mother had a couple of pennies, it went into the chicken. And on Saturday night, we had the distribution of funds. You had to have church money, milk money, and drawing money for school.
Mhm.
And it would be doled out. And then later on, one time my brother said to my mother, "Hey, Mom, heavy day tonight. How's the chicken?" So the chicken was dragged out to be dumped to see how much
You'd lay some golden eggs
how
there.
much of a date he could have that night.
That's good.
I also remember my mother singing while she was ironing, "If I had the wings of an angel, over these prison walls I would fly. I would fly to the arms of my loved one, because it's there that I'm willing to die. Meet me tonight in the moonlight. Meet me tonight all alone." I have a sad story to tell you. It goes on and on and on. This terrible thing about the guy who was in prison. And she would sing it
She would sing this?
as she ironed. My father had another one. A family was on a train, and the child was acting up. And one of the passengers said to the man, "Could you please keep that child quiet or send him to his mother?" And the man said, "I would, except that she's dead in the baggage coach ahead." And my father would sing 2 verses and a chorus of this, and my mother would say, "Please, Charlie." He
Oh
couldn't
my
sing,
God.
aside from the fact that it was this terrible,
Yeah.
sad
Yeah, yeah.
story. But the two of the wings of an angel.
You must have thought your mother had a boyfriend in prison or something.
Oh, it was, you know, someday I'm going to go over to New York to see the Tenement Museum, because we had a coal stove in the kitchen, and it served many purposes besides the heat. My mother would have a double boiler on the back of the stove, and during the night she would cook the oatmeal or a pot of soup or whatever was coming on the stove. In the morning, because we didn't have central heating, she would put our clothes on the stove, on the door of the stove, so we'd have warm clothes to get into. And you didn't have hot water, So you had to heat the water to take a bath. And that boiler was in the kitchen. So
Wow.
between the coal stove and the boiler and all of that.
We've been to that museum, by the way. It's well
Oh,
worth a
really?
visit.
I would love to go over.
Yeah. Well, let us know. We'll meet you.
Okay. I thought of another thing last night. This is just another funny story. My father was going to the dentist, and he said to my mother, I'm going down to the dentist. My mother was ironing, and the arrangement was when he finished, he was to call her, and they would meet, and I don't know what they were going to do. And he was no sooner gone. Oh, I have to, is that the, oh yeah, that Alma is in one of those pictures, yeah.
This is Alma. I was trying not to interrupt.
That's they used to come
Aunt's
to
got a
visit me.
couple of these
And
too.
Anna,
Auntie Anne's got a couple. I think there's probably a couple of my mother's out. Was this the day you professed?
no,
Or just a
no, it was
visiting?
just a visiting Sunday.
And this would be your father?
May I look?
Yeah.
That's my father.
Right.
And this is the girl who's going to be 80 next month, whose birthday
I was
party I'm
wondering.
going to. That's another friend of mine, Helen. And then Ann, Aunt Lila, and Anna.
And my grandmother.
Yeah.
So this is Margaret and her father. And then this
Let me
is,
see. Let me just bring it up again.
these
Okay.
are, these are two friends. This is your grandmother, Ann.
In the white?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just behind her is Aunt Jess, right? With the hat, because I saw that in another picture.
It probably, yeah.
It's hard to see in that picture, but then Lila. And your great-grandmother, Ann Robertson.
Oh, well. That's
See.
Sister Margaret again. Let's see.
You were saying before, what kind of
That's a
person?
better picture of her, actually. than- Sharon's got the better one of her.
I know that your arm is tucked in.
They amputated.
It does look like it was amputated.
He was so funny. My poor mother. God.
Where was that taken?
Over at the Old Mercy Hospital in Hempstead,
Hempstead.
on Long Beach Road.
You really... That's hysterical. And what were you saying, Margaret? I'm sorry, you were just about to say... I know we were holding up the photo and you were...
Okay, so this is where this is your mother, right? With that hat.
Oh, that's my mother, yeah.
Give us the hats of the...
My mother and father were making this plan. And when he finished with the dentist, he was supposed to call her, and then they were going to do whatever they had planned to do. And he was no sooner gone when he called. And he said, Jess, and my mother said yes. He said, the doctor suggested that I have thus and such done. Is it all right for me to do it? She said, Charlie, if you were any closer to me, I would wrap this iron around your neck. Why are you calling me to ask if you can have it done? Well, I didn't know if it would be all right for me to spend the money. She said, what in the name of God do you think the dentist is thinking of me? You have to call. Like, get off the phone, and a few other things. Well, anyway, so they were telling me this on visiting Sunday. And I said to my father, why did you do that? You know, he said, Margaret, if you lived in subjection for 42 years, you'd call too.
I think men around the world would concur with
would go with that one, huh?
Just that we start to realize that we should just check in before we make any major decisions.
Was your mother's name Jessie or Jessica?
It was Jessie, and
Oh, it was. I thought it was just Jess.
no, it was Jessie, and they always called her Jess. But how?
That's a mess.
All right, then you're Jess. When she was born, my mother couldn't be the godmother because she wasn't Catholic. So Uncle Will and Aunt Anna had Lila be her godmother, and they named her after my mother.
Oh,
So that
gotcha.
that
Yeah,
was the
that covered it.
That's how that came down.
Where did Will and Anna live? They lived out here on, right around the corner from you?
Right.
Midwood
right?
Street,
Midwood.
Fenimore Avenue and Midwood Street, right?
Right?
May as well cover some of that now. Do you have some memories? I guess I'll be selfish because we've got Edna's daughter here and Anne's grandchildren here, grandchild. Do you have recollections of going playing with your cousins?
Not too many because of the distance, but when we came, I always say the people who were nicest to us was Edna, Frank, and Anne.
Really?
Yeah, Jess and Bill didn't bother too much with us. Now some of that could have been the age difference, but Edna was always very good to us. Always pleasant times when we came, because we thought we were in the country.
Yeah.
You know, coming from Brooklyn.
Right.
And the first time I heard of an icebox cake, Edna had made it, and we had that on one of the trips.
You have a great memory. They would have moved by the time you were born, but you don't have any idea where they lived in Brooklyn.
Yes, as far as I know, they lived around Parkside, which is the next area beyond Windsor Terrace, and Parkside Avenue between Coney Island Avenue and Ocean Parkway, down around there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where they were.
My
Because
mother went to St. Rosa Limes.
she went to St. Rose, and that's where that is, on Parkside Avenue.
I guess my mother graduated, went through school, so the others probably were in school there at St. Rosa Limes.
And then, over the years, Lila used to drop the carrot in front of me. What a good student Edna was. And she got 100 in the Regents or something. Like, what are you going to get? You know, that kind of thing. But they were in St. Rose, but it was beyond Fort Hamilton Parkway.
Okay. Do you know the exact address?
On
Grandma says like fourth.
She mentioned Flatbush.
She mentioned Flatbush. Is that
So
what
that's
it was?
the area.
that was the area. It was called Flatbush then. Yeah.
They also moved a number of times too, if I remember. Because actually, I think that my mother told you the story. She started school in St. Rosa Limes, and then she was someplace else, and then she came back to St. Rose's and finished. So they were somewhere in
I
between.
wonder if that's still there, St. Rosa Limes.
It's still there.
It is?
Yes.
It's a grammar school? Is
It was a grammar school, yeah.
Okay.
It was a very strong and vital parish
Mm-hmm.
when I was growing up. That was the next parish to ours from Immaculate Heart. And the priest there, they had brothers teaching there too. The brothers for the boys and the Josephite sisters for the girls. He had, the priest there allowed the Boy Scouts to meet in the parish, and that wasn't always accepted. And I think my brother used to go down, because they didn't have them in our parish, and they used to go down there to St. Rose. It was just a vital place. It hummed.
Really?
There was always activity there, and
It's interesting that what she said that Jesse and Bill were a little more distant. They did the Florida trip. And you said it was after Aunt Lila died, so
it was right after Lila died, because
1980?
1979 to 1980.
It was my day in 1980.
But she died in 79.
Yeah, my mother was already not doing really very well by then. But they went to Florida, and it was Ann and Edna, and then Margaret and Lillian, which is Aunt Lila's daughter, right?
Yeah.
And they started at Uncle Frank's.
We started at Frank's, and when we got there, hello, welcome, oh, we're so glad to have you, everything. Come on in, make yourselves at home. Here's the refrigerator, here's where you'll be sleeping. I mean, anything at all that you wanted was yours. Oh, thank you very much. And we felt very comfortable. And a couple of days later, we went down to Jess in Palm Beach. It was very nice, but not quite so comfortable as it was with Frank. By the time we got to Bill and Barbara, Betty, we were treated like it was nice of you to stop in,
Oh,
and would you
boy.
have a glass of wine, and a cookie or something. Now, Lil worked in a hospital out in Ohio in a clerical position, and she was so embarrassed to tell them that, quote, she was only clerical. So I said, make it up. You know, you're directress of the department or, you know, or something. So we had a lot of fun with that. But we were treated like we were intruders there, in a sense. But going from Frank to this,
Wow.
it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You told me this story not too long ago. When she got to Jesse, I just looked at it and said, by the time you got to Bill, it got worse. I knew.
It was just.
Yeah.
You weren't.
We've been hearing that. We've been hearing that. Oh boy.
I jotted these things down about
Yeah.
my mother. My mother had great sayings, that she and Lila, the tremendous expressions. And she would say to me, laziness, have I ever offended thee? She'd say, no, Margaret, you have never offended it. You are so lazy. You know, I would get this all the time. And the other thing was, if you went any slower, you'd be in reverse.
I remember her saying that. I
Like,
remember that one.
speed it up. I am hurrying. Oh.
The day after the funeral, I said, you know what, I forgot, because Tom loved Aunt Lila's toast. She came to one Thanksgiving, here's to it again. I should have ended with, okay, Tom, here's to it.
Oh, I know. He would have loved that. Put that on his tombstone.
The neighbors were complaining one time about the children out in the yard. They were making too much noise in the pool, you know, blah, blah, blah. And my mother said to the neighbors, I'm so glad I can hear, I don't complain.
That's great.
Enough already, you know.
Yeah, I
And
know.
then my father used to say, you know, Jeff, if you were down at the police station, the cop would be bleeding before you knew he stabbed him. And I read that the Scottish women were plain and direct. And I said, boy, if that didn't sum up my mother and Lila, you never had to worry about what she thought of you or what they thought of you, because it was plain and direct. And one day, Lila and my mother were having a cup of tea or coffee or something in the afternoon, and my mother said to Lila, you know, I really don't like the way you're treating Lil. You're not giving her any sense of responsibility, and you're not doing this and you're not doing that. To which Lila said, mind your own business. And then Lila said to my mother, and I don't like the way you're handling yours either. She said, you have them tied to your apron strings, you do everything for them, blah, blah, blah. And my mother said, go to hell. And the discussion was over. I never saw them fight. They never raised their voices, but the discussion was over. I don't like what you're doing. You don't like what I'm doing. It's over. Like, I'll raise my children
Wow.
the way I want.
And that was it, huh?
And that
How many years apart were they in age?
was, maybe 6.
Yeah.
My mother was-
They weren't like 2 years apart.
Oh, no, my mother was born in 89.
But that lady had, I mean, she had gaps, so then, how many pregnancies in between? I know
I
this
think
is-
several.
Because it was George and Grandpa were about 2 years apart.
Yeah.
Then there's a big gap between
Then,
Grandpa,
my
Bill
mother.
and your mother.
yeah,
And then there
about
was Helen,
5
and then there was I know there was a baby Mary Ann after that, right?
after Helen. So,
Yeah. She just kept.
but they were plain and direct. But there was absolutely, you would have no doubt as to how. Oh, one of my friends in high school, she used to call the general. Here comes the general nuisance. They had a remark for everybody and everything. Oh, this is terrible in your situation now. Lila came up to the house one day, and she said to my mother, I saw the saddest thing I've seen in years. Mom said, what happened? There was a funeral at the parish, and Lila said there was one person walking behind the casket. My mother said, what do you want, a parade? And Lila said, Yeah, okay. Now, the deaths happened. And everybody was there. And Lila said to me, I guess if I don't die soon, you won't even have a wake. Because we were reducing the times, you know.
Right.
But, and then everybody else had a big attendance.
It was really true.
Yes, it was.
It was really what happened.
It was true for her, but they were a pair. You know what, I have some, I give you some stuff about Aunt Lila if you want it.
Sure.
She married Will O'Brien in about 1919 and 1920. And they had one child, Lillian. He died of TB. And then she met and married Bart O'Connor. And they lived on 18th Street, in the same house where my mother lived. And after Bart died, several years after Bart died, and many things in between, which I'll fill you in on, she was going with this guy named Fred Whoop.
Who my grandfather did not like.
Well, my father
Did not
too.
like. There was no ands, if, or buts.
So Fred Whoop was, when Lila was moving from here to here, she said to my mother, I'll be moving in with you for a while until I get settled. So
I remember her living with your parents.
she lived with my parents. And that's when Fred Whoop was on the scene. So Lila was talking about stocks and bonds and money in the bank and everything. And when they left that night, my father said to my mother, he's going to ask her to marry him. And my mother said, oh, Charlie, you know. Next scene, Lila and Fred are asking my parents to be the witnesses at their wedding.
This is her third wedding now?
This is her third.
Wow.
So, with many years in between. All right, so they had a house on East 5th Street, just below Church Avenue, the left-hand side of the street. And as you came in the back door into the kitchen,
It was a nice house.
it was a nice house, yeah. You went down about 3 steps into the basement where they had the laundry and that kind of thing. And Lila was always very interested in plants and gardens and stuff. So she was out in the backyard planting, and she would come in and go down to the basement, get something in and out. And when she came in at one point, she saw he had a lot of tools lined up on a table. And she said, what's he doing with all those tools? And the next trip in, he knocked her out and had her down on the floor and was banging her head against the concrete. And she knew, or at least felt for sure, that she was going to be killed. So she said she put her hands on his face and she was saying, Fred, you know, everything's going to be all right, and so forth and so on. Now he's covered with blood and she's a mess. And she said, I have to see a doctor. And he said, we can't have a doctor come here. What's he going to think? She said, well, I'll tell him that I fell down the stairs. And he said, oh, that sounded pretty good to him. So I called the doctor. I can't remember his name, but he lived on Beverly Road, Albemarle Road, and East 2nd Street. And Lila called him, and he said, I'll be over, because she was just a couple of blocks. And he came over. In the meantime, she crawled through the kitchen down the length of the corridor and was at the front door when he came. And as soon as he saw her, called an ambulance and what have you. In the meantime, Fred left to hide. After the ambulance took her out, he went back in the house to change his clothes because he didn't want the bloody clothes on.
Wow.
Okay, she's out at Kings County Hospital in pretty bad shape. They called my mother and father, and then I went out to see her the next day. And she had, in the meantime, the detectives wanted to talk to my parents. And my father said, sure. And the detective lived in our parish on Day Hill Road. So he said to my father, I'll come up Sunday after Mass. father said, fine. My mother put on a pot of coffee, bacon and eggs, and they're having breakfast with the detective. And my father, you would think, was not paying attention to anything. He said to the detective, if you're looking for him, I would go to Astoria on such and such a street. There's a candy store in the middle of the block. There's this and there's that. He identified from all the stories that Fred had told when he came. And the detectives went out. He was locked up. They caught him right away in Astoria, in the candy store,
Wow.
doing all the things. So the next day, I went out to Kings County to see Lila, and they brought him in to be identified. And as he's getting off the elevator, he sees me. He says, "Hello, Margaret." You know, like we were old friends, and he hadn't done anything.
Wow.
But anyway, he was locked up for a long time.
This is Fred.
Whoop.
Well,
A
was
third.
he a drinker, or what did he?
No, I think he was just
Just cuckoo.
cooking. So, several years go by, and his son called Lila and said, "Could you give me my father's Social Security number? Because my father died, and I want to get the money from Social Security." So Lila said, "When did he die?" And he gave her the date. Lila hung up, went down to Church Avenue, got on the bus, went out to the Social Security office, and filed for the money.
I never knew that part of the story.
She got the money.
She got the money, yeah.
Oh my
And then
goodness.
she got his regular check and so forth. But there's my father. I tell you, you'd think he wasn't paying any attention.
Oh yeah.
And he hadn't missed a beat. So
Wow.
anyway, she was there. So,
She survived all three.
oh, she survived all three.
I do. I mean, I think
Through difficult-
she was losing it a little bit at the end there. Wasn't that right, or no, or
No,
No.
she just was getting frail.
She was
Well,
frail,
maybe
but she
that's what it
she
was.
wasn't. She didn't lose it.
okay, okay.
She was at Maimonides Hospital, and I had spoken to Lil several times, and
Yeah.
Lil had offered for her mother to go out to live with them. And Lila didn't want to go because it was in Ohio, and she was a Brooklyn person and stuff. But at this time I called Lil, and I said, she's really in pretty bad shape. And Lil came on, and she said, "Mother, you just come with me for a while." So we had to, the thing was to get Lila out to Ohio. And we took an ambulance plane, and a nurse had to accompany her. So Nellie, the nurse, went with Lila.
Did you really?
Yeah, to Ohio. Well, anyway, getting on the plane, and the stewardess, and they didn't want to take her. I mean, she looked like the wrath of God, and she
Yeah.
was on a stretcher. So I said, "She's really all right, you know, and I'll be with her," and so forth and so on. So they moved us up to first class, and for most of the trip, Lila was out there. And after a while, the stewardess came around, and she asked if anybody would like a drink. And Lila came right to. And she said yes, she would like some wine. And she had.
Did they give it to her?
Yeah, she had her share of wine and was much better. So we now land in Columbus, Ohio, or wherever.
Lila liked her wine, didn't she?
Oh, yes.
That's, I think, what I'm thinking of. I'm probably confusing it with maybe a couple incidences where she might have had a little, more than she should have or something.
So we got out to, it was 65 miles from the airport to where Lil lived. And she was in an ambulance. So we're now riding, she's out. And all she could see were the trees. And she kept saying, "Green, green, green." Like, nothing else here but green.
Oh, no.
She didn't want to go there.
She didn't want to leave
But
Brooklyn.
she didn't, but shortly after that, she died. But she was out there with them, which was nice. She was with her grandchildren and stuff for a while.
Oh boy.
This would have been your great aunt?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sharon's good.
she was godmother to several of us, and
Really.
great lady. Yeah, and you know what I also noticed? She never criticized a young couple or discouraged them. Like if you were getting a degree, great, wonderful, I hope you do well. You're going to buy a house, good, I'm glad to hear that. Oh, that's great. It was always the upbeat, encouragement to any of us, you know, which
Well, I think you have some of that in yourself. I would say you're an optimist. You know, you kind of have to be when you're walking into bad areas of the city, trying to help people. You know.
Well, we used to follow the odor, either the cat or the I can't think of the anti-inflammatory. Think of one of the names. Like Sloan's liniment or something like that, that had a strong odor.
Yeah.
So we'd follow the odor to the patient's apartment.
Really? Did they always know you were coming, or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily.
Really?
And they always wanted to know who sent us and stuff.
Was that confidential?
No, we would tell them in most cases. I remember one time a priest asked us not to tell who sent him.
Right.
And the woman said, "Who sent you?" And I said, "The bishop." And she said, "You old fox." She knew very well it wasn't the bishop. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you where Lila lived.
Go on.
She lived on, these are my recollections, 16th Street, just above 8th Avenue. So between 8th and 9th Avenue. I remember going there, and for a period of time, she lived on 22nd Street, between 6th and 7th Avenue. I could show you these houses. I remember them.
I work on 17th, by the way, between 5th and 6th.
Okay.
So I'm in the neighborhood.
You're right in the
Are you
neighborhood.
talking, no, she's talking Brooklyn.
Are we
Brooklyn.
talking Brooklyn?
Oh, Brooklyn.
Okay,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm
I.
living in Manhattan.
No,
so.
this is all Brooklyn.
Hello.
I always figure because there's different streets and different boroughs, you know.
Then she was on 75th Street between 12th and 13th Avenues. And I was with her, I was staying with them, which I did very often. We were back and forth. And that was the first street that I was allowed to cross by myself, 13th Avenue. Because I remember when my mother came saying, "I crossed the street by myself." You know, it was the big thing. And in those days, they had very nasty names for everybody. And Italians were called greaseballs and wops and so forth and so on. And Lil was probably in her teens then, and she was going with a greaseball, and she was going to be annihilated because she was talking to this greaseball. But anyway, after that, they bought, she bought the hand laundry, the Times Square hand laundry, 3010 Avenue M, the bar rate 0619. And they did a lot of the clothes truly by hand. They did tablecloths and napkins and men's shirts. I mean, everything was, it's truly a hand laundry. And well, we were allowed to help. And the ladies' handkerchiefs were folded in a certain way. And they were tied with a red cellophane ribbon that we were allowed to do. Napkins were folded in a particular way. And they had what she called a bachelor service. So if the guy lived alone and the shirt didn't have a button on it, they would sew the button on, or if something was ripped, she would do like small repairs. And the woman who worked with them was a black lady named Gert, and Gert ran the mangle. And then, as I say, we kids would jump in the baskets that they had and push each other around the baskets in the laundry. But, you know, the name that was out there, and she eventually owned that house.
So you were in high school?
No, younger than that.
Younger than that,
yeah.
okay.
They had that laundry, I remember that.
The laundry, a long time, yeah. Times Square Hand Laundry was the name of it. But anyway, Lillian was O'Brien, and then the mother's second marriage, they were O'Connor. And I don't know whatever happened, but she and Bart didn't talk for years. They lived in the same. Lillian and Bart didn't talk for years. And when she got married, he didn't give her away. George Duffy, the friend, gave her away. Now, George Duffy and somebody else were detectives. And they had a radio in the car at that time, would you believe it? And my brothers used to sit in the car listening to the radio. And if it was anything that they needed George for, they'd run into the house and tell him, you want it on the radio.
That's cool. They sit in the car.
They'd sit in the car, and they thought they were hot stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because they were monitoring the calls.
Yes.
But she, anyway,
Lillian was in the waves
and oh yeah,
during the war.
oh, I should tell them about let me tell you this. Lillian was married.
I can remember her coming to Grandma and Grandpa's dressed in her uniform. I thought that was so impressive. Oh my goodness.
She married a fellow by the name of Bill Massey.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after their marriage, they lived on Bedford Road in Brooklyn. And the next thing I know, they were living on East 2nd Street, just below Vanderbilt. This was during the Depression, and they had at the time on Wall Street what was called a Scotch week. Instead of firing a guy, he worked 3 weeks out of the month, and the 4th week he took off without pay. So people still had something coming in, but not quite as much. Well, anyway, Bill Massey worked over there, and he was on his Scotch week. She said to him, would you take this letter out to my mother? And he said, sure. And he took the letter out, and it was Lil telling her mother that she was leaving, not to worry about me. She was going to join the wax. He didn't know his wife was leaving.
Oh my goodness.
So that was the separation there. The reason for the separation reportedly was he did not want children, and she wanted a family. She joins the wax. The next thing we know, she's with Frank Gorman out in Chicago or someplace. He was also married and separated from his wife. And I don't know how many children they had, but he and Lil, 3 boys? 3 boys.
I didn't know he had other children.
Yeah,
Oh,
out
three
here,
things that happened.
out here on the island. And then when this Bill Massey got married to somebody else, they had a family of about 6. And
I didn't hear that part of the story either. That's
we used to be hysterical.
So Lillian's 3 boys have siblings on
They had,
both sides on the other,
with the
Gorman
father.
and with, well, not Massey wouldn't be related, no.
No, they didn't know Massey. But that was,
No, that's right, it wouldn't have been related.
so Lil was, joined the wax and
What was
Wax.
wax short for?
the Women's Army
Four?
Corps.
It wasn't the Navy, it was the Army.
In the Army, yeah. And then, all right, now it's umpty years later, and Lil was having some problems with him, and she told the story that she was working, and she said, this is crazy, hanging around the house all the time. I'm going out to get a job. So she went out and got a job. And when she came home one day, a very precise housekeeper, and she opened the cabinet, and she said, isn't that funny? I don't remember putting the cup and saucer there. Well, later. Gee, I don't remember moving that. This kind of thing. And finally, she said to her neighbor, have you seen anybody going in or out of my house? And the neighbor said to her, I dreaded the day you'd ask me. She said, yes. He's been bringing somebody home during the day while Lil was working.
Oh no.
And this woman, every time.
This is the second husband.
No, this is the
Right.
second. Yeah, this is Gorman.
Right.
So.
But he also drank, didn't he?
Oh, he drank too, and Bart was a very heavy drinker. But eventually, her boys persuaded her to leave him. And I don't know what they did legally, whether it was a divorce or separation or whatever. But so she would have some money and stuff. And he said to Lil, you never appreciated the fact of where we lived, and I think they lived, White Lake might have been the name of it, but it was Waverly, Ohio. And he was a photographer for, what's the tire company in Akron? Well, they were
Goodyear?
among the tire companies. During World War II, he was a photographer for minute pictures of stuff that the Army wanted. For example, the inside of a pipe, you know, that kind of photography. He did very fine, refined photography. And they were living in this great place, and she said, it isn't that I didn't want to live here, but it was the struggle of trying to maintain the house with the amount of money that they had. And so, but anyway, the boys persuaded her to go through with the separation. So she and Lila got this place where Lila lived. And it may have been a little house, 5 rooms. And the way it was set up, Lila had a bedroom and a sitting room here. And Lil had a bedroom and a sitting room here. And they had the kitchen and the bathroom between them. So that worked out well. But the last time, this is another tearjerker for me, the last time I went to see Lila, she was pretty sick. She was pretty sick, and I knew that she wasn't going to be around much longer. And when I was going at the airport, walking down to the plane, I said, this is terrible. There is no one ahead of me, and there is no one behind me. So I had a very sad flight home from Ohio, but that was...
You were there about a week or so
before
she began.
Yeah, that's right.
We went out in July. I drove out, you know, and we spent a night. And she tells me that you had been there. She had pictures, and all of her Lillian's boys had been around. And somebody else, was it one of Helen's kids? Maybe somebody else had been, either they weren't, maybe weren't there, but they talked to her. She, you know, and she knew everything. She wanted to know everything about everybody, what Alan was doing, what Tom was doing, and she had the whole list. And then we had dinner, and I to this day, I rue the fact that I never thought of a tape recorder, but I asked her all these questions. Who's Ferguson's? And then the names, I kept throwing them out, and this thing, and she had them all down. And I said, now tomorrow, Aunt Lila, we're going to sit down, I'm going to write all this down. We took her to the hospital that night.
Yeah.
And it was like she waited for Ann and Edna to get there.
That's right.
And
yeah.
she wasn't going to wait for me to get all the history down.
Yeah.
If I didn't remember it when I heard it, that was too
You
bad.
want to ask Margaret while we're here, while we've got the tape rolling? Does Margaret know a lot of the questions you asked her?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember.
Ferguson was their cousin.
They're cousins.
His name was George Ferguson, and he either had a lisp or a speech defect of some kind.
Yeah.
And when my mother saw him coming, she said, oh my God, here comes Ferguson. He supposedly worked on the arch at Grand Army Plaza. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But that was one of the stories.
And then who was the other one that used to show up, and my grandmother would go, oh no, because he came for weeks. And they couldn't get rid of him.
Oh, I know. I can't think of his name.
It was like, oh no, he's coming. And finally my grandmother told him not to come back. And I can't imagine my grandmother doing that. But he'd come for the weekend on Tuesday. And
the man who came to dinner.
He'd come on Thursday and leave on Tuesday. That was the way it went. And it was like, you know, constantly. I can't remember that name. So, but Lila had an hysterical laugh with that night. She came home from the hospital briefly in between, but then she died very shortly.
Yeah, she was.
Well, I want to ask you, I want to throw a name at you. Just we were talking about you when you were out begging on the streets, ministering to the sick. Tell me about Mother Teresa.
Did Alma tell you this?
No, what happened was we went to church, and we have an Indian priest who visits in the summertime, and he's actually studying in Rome, and he will be finished this June, and then he goes back to the seminary, and he will be teaching in the seminary in India someplace.
Oh, what's his name? What?
Father Lawrence.
Oh, yeah, I don't know him because we have them coming here too.
Right. But he started today, and so he's been with us for like 3 summers, and he does his own little singing thing, and it's amazing because he hands out all these papers, and they start singing, and then he goes away, and nobody sings anymore, and then he goes back, and they start singing. But today's homily, he gets up, he reads the gospel, first words out of his mouth was about Mother Teresa, and he went on. I said, oh.
You know what? I've noticed that very few women talk about it. It's usually a man who talks about it. But my thing with her was, when we came to the diocese, I said we weren't supported by them. We had to support ourselves and collect and so forth. She walked down Jeroliman Street and got $10,000. And I've been screaming about it ever since. We took care of Bishop Malloy, Bishop Carney, Bishop McIntyre, this one, that one, and the other one. And we didn't get a penny.
Right.
She walks down and gets $10,000. So a friend of mine says she thinks it's professional jealousy.
She's got the marquee effect.
Not that I'm suffering from professional jealousy.
Oh my goodness.
But
my goodness.
Alma sent me some literature on her and put one of those stick-em pants on it. She said the devil made me do it.
Let's see.
Right, didn't you have some concerns about where some of the money did go? I mean, it seems like she was doing all this, you know.
No,
because they have.
God knows I have an attitude, but I figured she was being picked up at the airport, and she came in a private plane. And I mean, the woman's done a lot of good work. I don't question that at all. But I got mad because
she wasn't as poor and as.
But we did a lot too. But
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your friend Angela. Kathleen was saying that, well, you referred to it earlier, that you were the bad sister, quote unquote. You were living in an apartment.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I have to tell you the whole truth about this. One time, I said to Angela that I would never trust anybody again. I don't know what happened, but I said I would never trust anybody again. And I think she set out on a mission to convince me that I could trust somebody again. But anyway, again, this was after Vatican II, when everything was in upheaval, to say the least. So we asked permission to move to an apartment, which was not easy to do at the time, and we were the first to do it in our community. And they asked us how we were going to furnish the apartment, and the answer she gave was early poverty.
Dirt floors.
Dirt floor. That's yeah, it was pretty much it. And so we were together several years, and she was diagnosed with CA, and took care of her for a couple of years, and she died. But the people who criticized us the most at the time imitated us in short order. But many people did it after that. But
she was kind of it. She was Alma's age, right? She went to school.
She went to school with Alma, yeah.
What? Where was that apartment located?
359 Ovington Avenue in Bay Ridge, between 3rd and 4th Avenues. The R train went by, and during the day you didn't notice it. But after 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, the salt and pepper shaker danced on the stove, and you knew the train was tearing out to 95th Street.
What years did you live there?
From 1970 to 1997.
Oh,
Really?
That actually crisscrossed me. I was there on 95th Street and 4th Avenue at about 1997.
Okay, then that's
96,
when.
97, I was there.
Okay, that's when I came out here.
So same neighborhood. I probably ran by your house.
Many times. It was called the Suzanne. On the corner of 4th Avenue, on the 5th Avenue side, was a church, and on the 4th Avenue side was a church. There were 2 Protestant churches, and halfway down the block was another Protestant church, small, but there. And we lived in the apartment right off 4th Avenue, and it was called the Suzanne. A nice place.
Did you like Bay Ridge?
I loved it, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You liked it too, Sharon?
You know, when I was stationed at Henry Street, where I was for 19 years and 10 months.
You lived on Henry Street?
Downtown Brooklyn, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize, I knew that you, okay, we'll come back to that then.
Okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The sisters the sisters who were stationed in Bay Ridge used to talk about, oh, Bay Ridge, Bay Ridge, Bay Ridge. I said, it couldn't be that nice. It couldn't be that great. And it was transferred out there. I loved it, yeah.
More than Henry Street?
It was very different. Henry Street was a big old building. And you wore more clothes going to bed than you wore on the street. It was so cold upstairs. We were on the 4th floor, right under the roof. And
What was the address on Henry Street?
439.
What was that between?
It was on the corner of Kane Street.
That's right near where we lived. We had it, right? Weren't we?
Where were you?
No, we looked at a place over there
It was
a few months ago. It
Was it Henry?
It wasn't Henry. It
Hick?
Was the main one over there.
Court, Clinton.
Clinton?
Yeah.
It was definitely the corner of Kane and one of them. And it was not right on the corner. It was about 3 things in, but we were looking at a...
Strong Place. That's another. That was a little one over there.
Yeah, and it was one of the main drags. I think it was Henry, Sharon. I think it was Henry, but you were right on the corner of Henry.
Henry and Kane. There was a public school
Yeah.
across the street. And then,
That's a nice neighborhood.
well,
It's very quaint.
it is now.
Yeah. No, not then?
Well, it had gone down for a period of time.
Okay.
But we were very safe there because I used to walk home from St. John's at night.
Mm-hmm.
At 10 o'clock at night, you'd be walking along Court Street and everything was fine.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was predominantly Italian.
Mm-hmm. And now it's all
I don't-
yuppie central. You know,
Yeah,
Brooklyn is...
but
That's right near where Brian lives,
Yeah.
not too far.
we had, this thing goes on and on. Churchill's mother was born in the house across the street from our convent. And the English government paid for the renovation and updating of the building. And the day that it was going to be dedicated, they had a couple of tiers of seats outside our convent. And well, everybody was there, the sanitation band and the cops and all of this. And they were waiting for Imogene Coco to arrive. I'm sure you don't know who she
I know
was.
who she
was
is, yeah,
the
she's-
celebrity. Well,
Coco
they,
Chanel?
they were waiting for
Sid Caesar, right? She's on Sid Caesar show.
her to arrive. She was going to be the guest of honor. And all of a sudden, this limo comes down the street. And they said, here she comes now. So they struck up the band. The limo pulls over in front of the convent. 2 of our nuns get out. We used to get rides all the time. We didn't drive in those days. And they were up on Atlantic Avenue. And the undertaker saw them. And he said, sisters, you want to ride? And they said, yes. And they came down.
They came popping out.
They came popping out of the car when everybody's expecting Imogene Coco. And one of them was very funny, said, gee, we never got this reception before. And the band is playing, you know. And another time, the sanitation band was always playing for the feasts,
Right.
the Italian feasts. And they had the lights across the street, suspended across the streets for the feasts. And they hooked them up to our electrical stuff. But the lights were right into the window of a room where the infirmary was. So Georgina went down to pull one of the plugs for that row of lights. Later the bell rang. This big guy says to her, what's with the lights? She said, oh, the lights, you know. He says, you want the saint to come around the corner in the dark? Because they used to have a statue on the truck for the saint that they were celebrating.
Ah.
Georgina got scared, so she went downstairs and put the lights back on. When the band came around off Kane Street, onto Henry, they started playing the bells of St. Mary.
A movie
And then
we love.
it was such a wacky place. We also took care of a woman 2 doors from there who was terminal CA. And they couldn't take her to prison. She was too sick to be taken to prison. But she aided and abetted her sons who were in the drug ring.
Oh my goodness.
And they were in jail, and they brought the sons home to see the mother in handcuffs and heavily guarded and whatever. Well, she was one of our patients, and I was trotting in and out of this house to give us sedation. And the FBI was up on our roof taking pictures of everybody going in and out of this house.
Wow. So she was a mobster? Or,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So you're in the archives of the FBI, huh?
Yeah, in the archives of the FBI.
Did you have a
yeah.
habit?
Sure, we were full habit, yeah.
No, well, then they won't recognize you.
But I mean, it was just...
You wore full habit for all those years?
Well, from 43 until 65.
Yeah.
About 20-some years.
Right. Wow. So you lived initially you lived in Hempstead, and then you moved to Henry Street?
The
from
first
there?
2 years in Hempstead, and then to Henry Street,
Okay.
where I was for 19 years and 10 months. I had said to the superior much earlier than that, how do you decide where a sister is assigned? And she said, well, if you're going to a branch house, you have to be reasonably easy to live with, get along, have a sense of the mission of the community, blah, 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 you know, all this. So I said, well, what about Mercy Hospital? Well, in addition to all that, you had to be fairly good looking because of the leagues out here and everything. So it's now 19 years later, I've never been transferred. So I said to her, what did I do? Or what didn't I do? She said, I never said anything like that. But I remember the day she told me.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't have the looks. I didn't make it at here.
Oh my goodness.
But, you know, that's a little humor, I don't know.
You were on Henry Street for all those years, and then after that you moved
Bay
into
Ridge.
Bay Ridge.
And then after that to the apartment.
Okay. Wow. You also, Kathleen tells me, you spent a year in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah, that,
Am I jumping too far ahead? Or
no.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Those children lost their mother. And,
They were related to Angela.
yeah, they were Angela's, but their mother was Angela's sister. So, after she died, I stayed with them.
How old were they?
They were 7, 11, and 15.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, they were, but they're good kids. They're real good kids.
Yeah? Do you stay in
Yeah.
contact with
Oh
them?
yeah, I see them very often. Ian just came home from Australia, and I saw him over the weekend. Noel was here from Pittsburgh, and he stayed here 2 nights. And Jess is in Brooklyn, so she comes out often. But I hear from them almost every week.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Some of the kids up in Connecticut would say to Ian, who is she? And he said after a while, she's my grandmother. I mean, what else do you say, you know?
Right.
So one time the kid said, how could she be your grandmother if she's a nun? He says, well, after her husband died, she entered the nunnery.
It was cute.
Yeah.
That's good.
So they're good. And
Did they also have cancer?
yes, she did.
Same one as her sister? Same kind of cancer as
No,
her
it's a different. Angela had a rare form of it. Hers was called rhabdomyosarcoma. It was in the muscle of the tongue. Her mother had CA of the breast, and their uncle had CA of the lung. So the 3 of them died at different sites. But Ian, youngest, said, Angela died when she was in her 30s. My mother died when she was in her 40s. Tony died when he was in his 50s. He said, if I were Ed, I'd be nervous. Because Ed is approaching 60. But they've had a hard time of it.
I was going to ask you about transitioning into social work. Was
Yeah.
that after? What year did you go to Fordham for that?
I graduated in 57,
57.
55 to
Up in the
57.
Bronx, Fordham?
No, all my schools are closed. I went to Fordham in Midtown,
Oh, okay.
33rd Street? Yeah, 33rd
Because now they
Street.
have a Fordham up by Lincoln Center.
Yeah, no, it was in Midtown Manhattan.
Okay. So were you still ministering from a nursing standpoint along with the social work? That was just an additional thing?
It was an additional thing, and I think, as I said, I was able to do both. If I went in as the nurse, I could recognize some other situations, or contrary, the social work. I said to Sharon, I worked out of Maimonides for many years, and I did social work out of the home care department there, with the Hasidic Jews cursing me all the time.
Really?
Yeah,
Person.
yeah, because they're a very different group,
Yeah.
and
Very demanding.
very demanding. Yeah.
Oh, you were handling some of those people as patients?
Oh, sure.
Oh, really?
All right, now this is for your father.
Yeah.
Some of these patients would call, and they would say to Sister Mary Lorraine, I'm entitled. And Lorraine would say, excuse me, you're eligible for, I'm entitled. So your father said one day, if you're eligible, you're entitled. And I said, not necessarily. We had this discussion out on your back porch. Yeah.
Really?
But they're very
Yeah.
difficult to work with, yeah.
Sharon works with them as well.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there
yeah.
were some of their babies and
Oh.
yeah, that could be tough.
So you were, now you went to Maimonides, you were on payroll.
I was on payroll.
When does that happen? I got, if, this is, certainly, it's gotta be after the Vatican, because you wouldn't have been allowed out.
Right.
And then, yet, it also has to be when Medicare law goes into effect.
Well, Medicare went into about 65, I think, Medicare and Medicaid.
So that's all in the same
And
time
it
frame.
was after that,
Vatican is around that.
and the first job I had was at Victory Memorial. I worked there as a nurse. I did a couple of days a week because I had other jobs in the community at the time. So I did at Victory, and then I heard that they were looking for somebody for home care at Maimonides, so I went, and I got that job, and I worked with Vivian Bloom.
So this was late 60s?
Ruth Stolansky, yes,
Late 60s.
late 60s and 70s. I did the stint, and then I worked there about roughly 10 years at Maimonides.
Did you know my grandfather, Anne's husband? Fred?
Fred Cody, yeah.
What can you tell me about him? I lived a little. He lived
Um,
a little bit while I was.
I don't know much about him because except that he was a nice guy, and I liked him. But I couldn't visit then, and they didn't have much company. But he would come with Anne and Alma, you know.
Mhm.
Even when Grandpa died in 64, she had to get permission
To go to the funeral. Yeah.
That was a big deal.
We weren't allowed to go from here to there.
And that was, you know,
Really?
Yeah.
things were beginning to change at that point, but she still had to have permission.
I still had to get it. Yeah.
Was Vatican II a good thing?
Probably. I think in history it may not be, but it sure was good for us.
Suddenly you didn't have
We-
to ask permission
Oh
anymore.
yeah, you could use your common sense. We were reduced to the level of about a 5-year-old. In the first couple of years, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then after that, you could kind of shape up and be the adult that you were meant to be.
Did you work all through the weekends too, or did you
Yeah.
ever have any days off?
No, we did weekends, and very often we stayed at night if a person were terminal. The only good thing we did was, I mentioned that we put the name of the parish on the paper. And since we knew Brooklyn so well, if we had somebody, let's say in Holy Name Parish, and then we got 2 or 3 referrals in Immaculate Heart. They would be close together, so you weren't sent from East New York to Immaculate Heart. We tried to group it, you know.
And I got a question, because they had a convent out in East Meadow for a while, which was a different kind of thing.
A different kind of thing.
Yeah, and I belonged, I don't know how, it must have been because it was you and the nurses, because the Josephites at Sacred Heart signed us all up to be nurses. Pinstripe was one of, you know, the candy stripers.
Candy stripers, yeah.
Over at Mercy. And they sent me, and I said, I don't want to do this. And I lasted 2 weeks, and they said, oh, you know. But I belonged to what was called the Antonets.
The Antonets, yeah.
Over in
East Meadow.
East Meadow, and that we did every week, and we made the cancer pads.
The cancer pads, yeah.
That wasn't hands-on nursing, but that was more nursing than I've ever really gotten involved with. But did they go out into the community there too?
Yeah, I think they did at East Meadow, but they're definitely in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because I mean,
definitely
they were not near transportation at that point, really.
No, and at that point, those sisters drove.
One of your friends was there. What was her name?
I don't have many of them, so I should know her.
But she was in the novitiate with the others. I'm trying to. Because I mean, she knew who I was, that I was related to you. Somehow there was a. I'm trying to remember.
I can't think who was there.
That was such a pretty old building. Too.
Yeah, that was the what do you call it?
It was a gatehouse to
for Mitchell Field.
Yeah, but it was there before the barracks, I think.
Yeah.
I remember also being taken to Henry Street one time from friend and mother's, and that was like, oh, I don't know. It was dark, and we got stuck in a little parlor, and
that's right.
And it was like, you know, if you got a cup of tea, that was.
You didn't.
You know.
No, you didn't.
We
no.
sat and, you know.
Really?
She was allowed to come see us.
Wow.
Yeah, you know.
Maybe about 20 minutes, and then go away, get out of here.
We couldn't. There was.
Yeah. So what didn't we cover that you'd like to cover? 18 minutes on this tape anyway. So we'll bring it on home with. I want you to go through your list and make sure we're covering some of the things.
I told you about Lila and Lillian, who were the two.
Did you see Helen's children growing up?
Oh yeah, I should mention Helen. Helen had 6 children. They lived in Greenpoint, and we went there pretty often on the trolley. I have one recollection.
When she died, we went to Greenpoint. That's the first, the second time in my life I've been.
That's a very different area. If you're not familiar with it, years ago it was Polish.
Greenpoint or Greenpoint?
Greenpoint.
It's that and Williamsburg. Parts of that is very Polish still.
Yeah, and you know, it was a very neighborly place. If we had patients out there, you could always rely on a neighbor to pitch in or help and so forth. But if you took Lila and my mother and Helen, 3 of them together, Lila wanted to be the height of style. Helen couldn't care whether she had shoes on her feet or teeth in her mouth. I mean, nothing bothered Helen. And my mother was in between. So they were very interesting 3, but very much like each other with the kidding and stuff. And she was married to a man named Frank Weaver. And he was for a moving company. And I'm not sure, but I think it might have been Strang. Big moving company in Brooklyn. A heavy drinker.
This is a scenario that's going through the layers here.
And so I think she had it hard from the point of view of the 6 kids, and he wasn't always on hand. She lived in, they lived on Jewel Street, the last one, when I remember them, and they also lived on Manhattan Avenue. Earlier in the game, much earlier, Joey was chasing Dorothy around the house with a fork. and stabbed her in the eye.
Wow.
And she had, real a bad situation with her eyes, and her eyes were crossed, and she wore
Oh,
glasses
boy.
and stuff when,
That's
you
terrible.
way, way back.
Yeah.
But those two were chasing each other, and Frank, their oldest son, married a woman who was physically handicapped, and I think her name was Julia McGee, and they lived out there in Greenpoint. I don't think Helen married, but she had a daughter, Adrian. Anne married a man by the name of Earl. I don't remember his last name.
They used to come to Grandpa's parties, and they
Yes.
have a daughter who did live in Levittown, and we were going to keep in touch, but that didn't go very far.
And
And
then
of course, Edna married
Ed-
Kelsey from Union.
the Kelsey, yeah. And
She had one son, Michael.
I don't know who
Michael.
Dorothy married. But there wasn't as much connection with them, and I don't know why. We did go there and stuff,
Right.
visiting, but it wasn't like Lila. I was there. We were there all the time.
But they like Helen and Adrian kept in touch with Lila.
Yes.
Because I
See,
can
Li-
remember going to Lila's, and she always had pictures of Adrian as
Yeah.
growing up, and I would have, I don't have pictures of me.
Yeah.
How come you have pictures of her?
Lila was like the core person.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, she.
And as far
She
as
was-
the Brooklyn,
Yeah.
She was
keeping the Brooklyn
frail Aunt
people.
Lila when I came on the scene, so it's so interesting
Right.
to hear these
Yeah.
stories
Yeah.
because she was much older, or I don't know if she was much older, but she was, again, just getting sick at that time. You said that your grandparents, W. Francis Robertson,
William
William
Nisbet.
Francis,
I
and
knew
Mary
Francis,
Ann
but-
Nesbitt.
Marion.
You did not know them.
No.
And where did they pass away again? Just repeat that to me.
She,
On your
Mary
mother's
Ann
side of the family.
Nesbitt died in Manhattan. She fell down a flight of stairs because Catholics moved into the building.
Oh.
They didn't want to be associated with Catholics. And
You mean she threw herself downstairs?
no,
Or-
an accident.
Okay,
They were looking for another place to live,
I see. And it happened during
and
that
she
period.
fell down the stairs.
Okay.
Now, that's what I've heard over the years. I don't know what.
That's definitely the story.
I don't know if
It's always the only story I've heard.
and then he went out to San Francisco, and he was killed in the earthquake.
And you and Lillian went out there because
Yes.
when Lillian moved out there, right? Didn't she?
Yep, yes.
To one of the boys is out there.
When the boys were out there, they persuaded Lil to go out to California to live. And she would go to the pool with a fur coat on. And her son, Donald, used to say, "Mother, you look like an ad for American Express. I never leave home without it." She'd be sitting, she was always cold.
San Francisco could be
But
chilly.
we went down to the Chamber of Commerce or City Hall or someplace out there to see if we could find anything about. But they had no records of him. And of course, considering that it was an earthquake, then in 1906, we couldn't get anything.
So we don't really know how he passed away
No.
specifically.
No, just that was the story that he died out there.
They were from Glasgow, Scotland.
Yeah, I think so. Was Glasgow? Yeah.
That's what Kathleen has. You know, did you ever visit Scotland?
Yes, about a year ago.
Really?
And I'm sorry.
Well, good for you.
Hey.
See that?
Ian, that's the youngest of these kids, was over in London, and I told him wherever he was for his 21st birthday,
You were going to meet him?
I would go. And
Good for you.
I went last year
Did he
Bye.
introduce you as grandma?
by myself.
Did he introduce you as
I was
grandma?
my grandma all over the place. I stayed in a dorm, with a kid's dorm. They were so nice to me. I had my walker with me because I couldn't get around. And these kids would carry the walker up the 3 or 4 steps for me, open the door. They're real good. But anyway,
That's great.
that was.
That's a nice story.
That's
was-
wonderful.
And that was in England where you met him, or
I went to London to see him, and we went to
Okay.
Glasgow from there,
from there?
and spent a couple of days.
Did you get to
there.
Edinburgh?
No, I didn't have the time with it.
What was the
Prettiest
question?
city.
I really.
Edinburgh,
Oh,
much
yeah.
pretty city.
I didn't have the energy, And I think as I look back, I was really sick when I went, but I had told him
You would go.
I would go. So I went, and the day I was leaving him, I said goodbye to him in the airport, and I remember saying to myself, oh God, I feel so sick. And I was just grateful that I got home. And then from then on, I went down.
Well, we're going to work our way up.
When were you diagnosed?
December 4th of that year. I saw him in October.
December 4th, 2003?
2003. Yeah.
Wow. With what specifically? What is your...
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, gastric. So it involves my digestive system, and that's from the divine plan. You know, he always takes from you
Yeah.
what you like.
Right?
So I like to cook and I like to eat.
Oh boy.
So there, right up in smoke.
Now you're being, after a lifetime of nursing others, you've got people here, I assume.
Yeah, I was up in the infirmary for quite a while I was having the treatments, because I got sick after each treatment. So between December and April, I was admitted to Mercy 6 times. After each treatment, I was admitted, to the point where the girl on cancer care was singing, go home, Jack, or no more, Jack, or get out of here, Jack.
Hit the road, Jack.
Hit the road, Jack, yeah.
Oh boy.
And, but anyway, on the right side of the grass, what can I tell you? No, it was just, it was tough. I didn't react well to the treatment at all.
How do you feel today?
Well, just to add to it, now my back is out of alignment, so I have the pain from the back.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I'll take care of it. I went to an orthopedist this week.
Yeah. Good. Parting questions. Last couple of minutes on tape. Anything? Did we miss anything?
Oh, we tell him about
We missed probably
tell
a
him
lot
about going to the beach
for now.
and meeting your father without your habit for the first time.
Oh yeah.
I
We went to the beach. We were on vacation.
Yeah, I don't remember what you tell me. I don't remember what you're going to say.
He didn't recognize you.
Oh. I didn't remember that.
You didn't remember that?
No.
They went to Atlantic City.
Atlantic City.
And
Yeah.
she got a week off, and then they get to go to the beach. And
We
like, my
went.
parents came down and met her, and she's talking to him, and he's looking funny. He says, "Who are you?"
Oh my goodness.
Something like that. Who
He
are
was
you?
used to seeing you in the habit.
In the habit, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Another thing
And
about
then
him.
what happened to your hair is what was.
Oh, that was-
He was looking for her hair. You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she didn't
yeah.
have that anymore.
There wasn't any such thing. One time I was collecting at the entrance to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and a man came along and held his hand like this. And he held it a couple of seconds. I looked up, it was my father. He said, "My God." The first time he saw me sitting with a box, my God, and what we did to protect you and keep you from this neighborhood. There I was down on Hamilton Avenue with my box.
Did he drop the coins in that one?
Oh, he better.
That's a great story.
He was very funny,
Her religious name was.
Carolus, which was Latin for Charles.
Yours?
Yeah, we had to take a name and religion, and mine was Carolus. It was Latin for Charles. And I really took it for my brother, who had died. But my father had more comments about it because his name was Charles. He said, "Of course you didn't take it for me." No, took it for a brother. All kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, all the time, yeah.
So would you be Sister Carolus?
I was Sister Carolus, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So was it strange suddenly calling you Sister Margaret? Was that post-Vatican II, or what?
After
Well, we
Vatican.
always know her name.
After-
Yeah,
So
but I
around
mean,
the house,
you could
around
call
the
her-
family was Margaret.
Yeah.
In the family, but she was Sister Carolus, and any kind of public kind of thing.
Yeah, we had, after Vatican II, the change in the habit
Yeah.
and the customs and so forth.
Right.
And we were told we could return to our baptismal name if we chose. And many, many people did. Some of them didn't. They kept their religious name. But we weren't allowed to celebrate our birthdays in the old days. You celebrated your feast day. And my father used to say, gee, funny thing. He says, I've had a birthday and a feast day all these years, and nobody ever celebrated my feast day. You know, I mean, he always had a remark.
Right.
But,
He was just kidding.
oh yeah, yeah, about everything. Another one. During Prohibition, my mother used to make gin, and he was drinking gin, and I said to him, Daddy, what are you drinking? What's in the glass? He said, holy water. So I said, oh. So I'm out with the kids, and I said to my friends, did you know that my daddy drinks holy water? And he said to my mother exactly why I didn't tell her what was in the glass. I mean, she'd be blabbering all over McDonald Avenue. Years and years and years. All right, my mother died. I'm going through the proverbial tin box with all the stuff in it. Margaret, remember this, remember that. Margaret, here's the recipe for gin.
He gave it to you?
She gave it, she left
my
it.
goodness.
She left it for me.
Did you make it? Did you ever make
I
it?
never made it, no, but I have the recipe.
Oh,
But
that's good to know.
Oh,
you know,
yeah, what's the recipe?
she was the smartest, uneducated.
She was very
I mean, they were bright people. They didn't have any formal education.
Yeah.
None of them did, but they all were really.
But in this box, she had a sheet of paper, a couple of them, 8.5 by 11. 3/4 of the way down, her signature. Margaret, type in anything you have to above my signature. So if I needed something for the bank or the insurance company or whatever I would have needed it for, type it in
She did.
above my signature.
Wow. That was smart. Very
I
smart.
mean, just,
Good thinking.
yeah, well, all that kind of stuff. But they were funny. They were funny.
So what words of advice do you have for us as we move forward in this life?
Keep laughing.
Yeah. We're trying.
It's a terrible. Before the day I received the habit, the priest gave the sermon, and he said, we should live in such a way that when we die, they can put on our tombstone, she died climbing, meaning in every aspect of your life, you were on the way up. I said, that gave me the title for my book. It was all uphill. Because it's been all uphill, you know.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's great.
it's not easy, you know, to keep going. I felt, as I mentioned in the course of just being, having no one ahead of me and no one behind me. That's what bothered me the most. I have no nieces and nephews. Now I have people on the side of me, you know, but just no one else, and I found that very hard.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had no grandparents, that
Yeah.
I found that hard. But you know what? In the course of my mother and father were really grandparents to so many people in the neighborhood and stuff, you know. They were just
Your mother always had a story about somebody and their kids.
their
She
kids,
always
yeah.
did.
And you know, when my father answered the phone, he used to say, "Hello, central office," because everybody came through the house. Hello.
That's nice. That's a warm house. That's a warm
Yes. Another time, he was looking for something in the kitchen, and my mother said to him, "What are you looking for, Charlie?" He said, "Didn't you make muffins this morning?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Where are they?" She said, "I gave them to Schnoz." Now, Schnoz was a man, I think he was homeless. He used to sit on the street over on Greenwood Avenue and in front of the firehouse. I mean, all these things. And he said, "What did you give them to Schnoz for?" She said, "He likes them." He said, "So do I." But she's making muffins for Schnoz up on
Funny.
Greenwood Avenue.
Schnar was his last name?
Schnoz.
Schnars. That's funny. That's funny.
And then their 55th wedding anniversary, when they were running out of salt, they the neighbors downstairs were going out, and they were dressed up. And my mother said, they must be going to a party. My father said yes. They didn't know it was a surprise party for them. And when they got out to the convent,
Oh.
the neighbors and everybody else, a lot of the children on the street that she used to talk to, they were just friendly people. That's,
That was their 55th?
that was their 55th.
Not the 50th?
No, the one here was their 55th.
The one
one-
here?
yeah.
Okay, that's not the one where I had the